Hey everybody, welcome to We've Got Ward, a Doof Media podcast series where we expertly dissect and discuss Ward, Wildbow's return to the world of parahumans. My name is Matt Freeman, and if you know time as well as I do, you wouldn't talk about wasting it.
And I'm Scott Daly, and I dare say you've never even spoken to time. It's an Alice in Wonderland reference for those of you that don't get that. This is the weekly podcast where Matt and I eagerly dive into Wildbow's world of light orb therapy, timely trains, and alien-based death powers as we analyze and interpret this ongoing web serial. This week, we're ending Arc 11 Blinding with Chapter 11.12, and then confusingly skidding into the end of Arc 12 something? Arc 12 something?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah, this is a little curveball.
Yep.
Structurally speaking.
Victoria has to collect herself and her team after the events of the horrible events of the last chapter. They come together and decide what it has to happen next, and if she's even capable of it. And then next we move into the mysterious Arc 12 with 12.Z, and we learn all about the incredibly sane March and her nefarious plans. It's a couple of big chapters, Matt. What did you think of them?
I'm just first going to highlight your use of the word collect when you said that she collects her team.
Oh, you caught on to that, did you?
That was good stuff. Yeah. Okay, man. Okay, this is one of those weeks where it's like you get the first chapter and you're like, holy shit, this is going to be something that is both really hard to talk about, and we're also going to talk about it forever. And it's like one of the best chapters ever, and it's very unusual, and there's just so much to say about it. And then Saturday rolls around, and then another chapter, which in a completely different way hits all the same check boxes of being just something where you're like, well, okay, I guess Wildbow wants us to have a long episode this week.
Yep, that's what we got. I actually, a weird thing happened to me today as I was really diving into the second chapter and working on finishing up our prep work. I had gone into the preparation for this week saying 11.12, loved it, loved this chapter. Like, I liked the March interlude, but man, you can't get better than 11.12. And then as I really started sitting down with this interlude, with this March interlude that we're going to be talking about, I realized all the things it was doing and how it was doing them. And it was one of those moments where really analyzing the chapter just made me absolutely fall in love with it. And I think I was bombarding your G-chat the entire day, just being like, Matt, I think I'm starting to like this chapter. 10 minutes later, Matt, I love it.
Yeah.
and so, yeah, my appreciation of the second of the interlude like skyrocketed once I sat down. And not to say I didn't like it before, just that my appreciation for it like just rose. And I had this, I think I removed it, but I had this moment in our script that was like, I liked the March interlude, but 11.12 is really what I come to this book for. And I had to get rid of that because it's not true anymore. Yeah, I mean, a couple of great chapters. So much is going on here. Right. So much to talk about. So many like open-ended things as well.
Yeah. You know, while we're up front talking about reactions, I like my first comment in the Discord after reading the chapter was this story is going to give me a fucking heart attack. Because like I was having like an uncomfortably fast heart rate for the entire March chapter because I was like, what's going to happen? Like I was so anxious about what was going to happen. And we can talk, we're going to get into it obviously and talk about
sure.
Like, why I was anxious and that's going to be fun. But yeah, just like 11.12 harrowing, 12.Z heart attack causing.
My word would be delightful.
Delightful, yeah,
in the weirdest way possible.
Yes, let's just go ahead, Scott.
Let's do it. I mean, we got so much to talk about, so much to do, so we might as well just jump right into it.
All right. So we open up with 11.12, and we resume the harrowing ordeal that is this story, with Victoria trying to support her team in the aftermath of the maiming and dismemberment of most of their number. And I think this is one of those chapters where the right approach to discussing it is probably to sit back at the start and talk about how the chapter is structured and what it's doing overall. Structurally, it seems to me that the chapter is taking the time to check us in with each of these characters and to show how they're reacting to this event. And then in many cases, we see how the characters react to how the other characters are reacting, usually by trying to take care of each other in a variety of ways. And of course, Victoria is our protagonist, point of view character, and person whose whole personal struggle centers around a history of having been trapped in a body twisted by powers. So we're obviously focusing a lot on how she specifically is handling all of this, both emotionally and behaviorally. Mm-hmm. And to be honest, part of the reason why I started this episode with this lengthy high-level preamble is that I kind of don't really want to dig into the details. It's heavy, it's painful, it's something that almost feels gauche to talk about in analytic, cold terms. But that said, ultimately, I'm here because I love Wildbow storytelling and I want to understand better how he does it. And to do that, we do need to approach the chapter in more detail.
Yeah, I think that's wonderfully said. I don't have too much to add to that. I mean, obviously, I love these books. I love every bit of them, and I'm gonna love talking about March's interlude. But this chapter is, I think, why I've committed to spending 4 years in this world, between Worm and Ward, 4 years probably in this world, and spending multiple hours every week talking about it. And like you said, we can break this chapter down and talk about it analytically, and we'll make jokes about it because that's what we do, and we'll laugh, and we'll feel uncomfortable with the uncomfortable parts. But I don't think there's anything we could say in this analysis that would properly capture the emotions felt while reading this chapter, right? Mm-hmm. The emotions felt when you opened this up or clicked it open and read it the first time. The best we can do is, as you said, just try to understand why we felt those emotions, why the text made us feel this way. We can't describe that feeling, but we can try to understand it a little bit.
Exactly. I honestly was struggling starting out the chapter summary, because everything I wrote, I was like, this is so like I don't know, cold. It doesn't work. And I was like, okay, let me think of remind myself why I'm doing this, and then approach it with the right mindset.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, let's get into it, and I think we'll do our best to do justice to it.
Yeah.
So first we check in with the two heartbroken Juliet and Darlene. Juliet is putting out a vibe of restrained fury, and Darlene is reacting to that vibe by being very stiff. Juliet tries to space out by listening to music, but her headphone cord is severed, and Victoria comes to the rescue for the first time in this chapter by offering Juliet her headphones.
Yeah, and this is one of those small moments, but those small moments matter type of things. Victoria does not know Juliet very much, or Darlene for that matter. I mean, she spent time with some of the heartbroken, but not these two, right? And so she doesn't really know them. She doesn't know anything about them really, but she's still connected to them through this trauma, this thing that just happened. And we open this chapter by really the first lines of this chapter are almost drawing a direct link back to the last chapter. She says to Darlene, "I'm back. That wasn't a minute, was it?" And I think that shows that she's fulfilling her promise to Darlene. She said, "I've got to go away, but I will be back. It will be less than a minute." It is very, very important to her to fulfill that promise to her. And then we move forward with that with this tiny little gesture to Juliet. And what I love about this, and this is true here, and I think through the rest of the chapter as well, Victoria in the back of her mind is conscious of, okay, her phone battery is going to run out eventually. She's using this as a distraction tool, and her phone battery is going to run out. And we have to plan for that happening. And you could argue this is just a tactical move, and I think Victoria makes that argument herself, that this is just okay, she's going to run out of this, and then what's going to happen? This could be bad. But I think it's a little more than that, to me at least, because, we've talked about a few times about how Victoria, her greatest goal throughout this entire story, and she's repeated it several times, has been to stop what happened to her from happening to other people. No more glory girls. That's what she said. I don't want this to happen to other people. And while that, yes, means hopefully preventing people from being chopped up or mutilated or abused in any kind of terrible way, hopefully preventing that stuff. But I don't think that's all of it, because a big part of what happened to her was not just that she was mutilated by Amy in this horrible way, but then after that, she was left alone. She was abandoned. Her family abandoned her in those 2 years. So I think part of this whole no more Glory Girls thing isn't just preventing people from getting hurt like she did, but ensuring that if they do, I can't leave them alone. And we saw that with her with the Navigators. We're seeing that again here, where she has to be there to help them. She has to. And later in this chapter, she's going to be thinking about, I'm what if I leave? What if I leave here and go fight somewhere or help something? And then she says she can't. And she lists the reasons she can't for very tactical reasons, right? She says, like, Byron can't be in charge. He's not used to it. These other girls could get in trouble, and I need to be here. But I think it's more than that. I think it's the core of who she is, that leaving these people alone is something she can't do.
Yeah, no, I think it's a huge part of her personality to take care of people.
Yeah.
And to be a leader. I mean, it's interesting to me that she has all of these hats that she wears. She has all these labels she assigns to herself. What's interesting to me is that two of the major labels that I would give to her would be, one of them would be something like a caretaker, like someone who looks after others, and the other would be leader. And those aren't necessarily the same thing, although there's overlap between them. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't think of herself that way, but that's
right.
Clearly what she is. And there's moments in this chapter where her leadership is absolutely evident, and just her natural leadership qualities are showcased here, because she's under even more emotional duress than she was during the Navigator incident, when we talked about how she was so poorly off that she wasn't thinking. Her narration was different.
Yeah.
Because it was like her internal thoughts had just shut down and she was just reacting. But she's still functioning and leading here. And in fact, it's almost like she's more functional and she's still having a rough time, but she's more functional than she was after the Navigator incident.
Yeah, because she has to be, right? That's the whole thing. And I love that you said that she would not list this as one of her leadership qualities. Like, if we asked our discussion question for this week to Victoria, comforting and care would probably not be one of the things she would say. But you're absolutely right. That's what she does, and that's what she slips in. And she doesn't really even think about it. She just does it. Oh, you need headphones? I have these headphones here. Oh, you need someone. It isn't so important for someone to be here. I'll do it. Mm-hmm. I'll go talk to Sveta. I'll talk to Byron. I'll talk to Ashley. I'll call people on the phone. I will take all this on me. And it's fantastic. And it's tragic in a way, because it all comes from her trauma, right? That's the source of this need to do this for other people, is the fact that she's experienced this herself and she knows what it's like. But there's some value in that. I think that you've been through this terrible thing, that then you know that people need you and kind of how they need you in those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So we move on. Basically we're following her around as she sees to the various people. So next she sits next to Darlene, and then Darlene leans onto her with her head on Vicky's lap and her back pressed against Aiden's. And there's this moment where all they're doing is sitting there, and it says, my heart was pounding like I was in the middle of a fight. My thoughts were chaotic, and I was just sitting, trying to figure out how to handle this, worried that I was somehow doing this wrong.
Yeah, I like this a lot. I think it's really important that Wildbow chooses to give us this window into her head, right? Because she's automatically fulfilling that caretaker role, but that doesn't mean she's just good, right? She's a wreck, and not only is she like terrified because this is bringing back memories, but she doesn't want to screw up. She doesn't want to hurt these people. She doesn't want to make it worse. And even though you feel like you've gone through this before and you know maybe what people need, you're still not sure. Look, I'm going to talk about Carol here for a sec, and I don't want to excuse Carol's behavior, but it's not hard to see Carol having this same point of view when looking at Victoria, standing there and knowing I don't know how to handle this, and I'm terrified that I'm going to handle it wrong. And of course, Carol's response to that fear is to succumb to it and get the fuck out, right? That's what Carol does. Victoria has a very different response to that fear, and I think that's why she's probably a better person overall, where she chooses in that moment of fear, that moment of terror, and to not get out, to stay in it, and still try to help out. And that's the difference between these two characters, and maybe that'll matter down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I like that when she hands Juliet the headphones, it's in this like halting way, like I know that what I'm offering is like a paltry, meaningless thing, but like it's not actually,
Mm-hmm.
like somebody is missing a limb, and you offer them your earbuds.
Yeah,
you're like in yourself, you're like, oh my god, like what a meaningless gesture this is that I'm making. But for that person, they're like, oh, that's all I needed right now.
Right, yeah, exactly.
So next, Lookout appears, and she's basically just kind of grimly soldiering forward, walking on her severed stump. And as she kind of talks to Victoria and Darlene, it's interesting because I kind of took her at her word here. Like she says that she's legitimately way more upset that her friends, or rather, my take is that she's legitimately way more upset that her friends are injured than she is about the fact that she is injured. And like when she says that she's been hurt worse than this, I take it to mean she's felt way worse than this, at least about herself.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, she's having a hard time about being physically maimed, but it's like, it just seems like she's much more concerned about how everyone else is doing.
I think you're right. I mean, Victoria almost basically says as much when she says, or not physical pain, indicating that the type of pain she's referring to is something else. And I think that's probably absolutely correct. I love this moment where she walks by Chicken Little, and there's this really moment of like really tense where you think she's going to sit down next to Chicken Little, and then it's going to be like him with these two girls on either side of him, and everyone's in bad shape. And you can just kind of see this like very bad place Darlene just like popping off, and you're like, oh god, is this when our love triangle like escalates to something terrible? But then Kenzie moves past Chicken Little, and she sits down next to Darlene, and it's like this moment of, yes, she's concerned about him, but she's thinking practically, and she's reaching out to someone else. And not to say that the love triangle conflict is over, but not today.
So, and this is the first kind of instance to my mind of what we're going to see throughout the rest of the chapter, which is these people who may have their disagreements or their points of friction, just coming together and absolutely setting all of that aside to try to be there for each other and to try to help each other. I mean, there's going to be a bunch of places actually where we point that out explicitly coming up. This is the first one.
And I think that's why, as tragic and gruesome and horrifying as many of the moments in this chapter are, you leave this chapter and therefore this arc with this tinge of hope, right? Like this tinge of like there's bad stuff on the horizon. We'll get into it next chapter, but like there's this bit of hopefulness to the fact that these people have come together, regardless of their backgrounds. Like these are two teams that used to be on opposing sides, and now, at least temporarily, they've come together and are supporting each other. And yeah, I mean that makes you feel a little good. Yeah,
right. It's a very, I don't know, special mix of harrowing and heartwarming, because it's not like you walk away from the chapter like, oh, that's so wonderful, but like,
right.
But neither are you like, well, that was just sick, and I just feel sick. Like there's a definite positive feeling that comes from it. You're sure. Right.
Yeah. But you're right. It is weird because you leave the chapter with Victoria basically like wrestling with this idea of murder and this murder that she feels she might have to commit. And so like, that's not a good thing to leave the chapter with, but it is not like totally hopeless either.
Right. So we find, that Kenzie's hands have been mutilated and she can't even take off her own helmet. So she's not exactly doing fantastic. As Victoria takes off Kenzie's helmet, Kenzie babbles a bit, revealing something closer to the degree of distress that you would expect. And then, of course, when her helmet is off, we see that she is smiling.
Yeah. This is one of those sections that I get excited about despite its awfulness. Like it's awful in just like the best fucking way ever. Like Kenzie's like babbling about how much she's sweating, and then the helmet comes off, and Victoria immediately notes that there's wetness on her cheeks, and it's not just from sweating. She's been crying, and the mixture between crying while having this big smile on your face is like so off-putting, and she wants to comment on it, but like the whole smiling thing was something told to her in confidence, so she can't comment on it. And I mean, like, this isn't in the text itself, but you wonder, like, as Kenzie's like babbling about how much she's sweating, even though there is truth to that, you wonder if she's trying to cover for the fact that she's been crying. Mm-hmm. And so she's like setting this up as like, yeah, I've been crying. So like, if you see any wetness on my face, that's definitely, it's because I've been crying. And like, she's trying to hide that emotion a little bit. I don't know if that's supported by the text or anything, but I liked that interpretation of like part of the reason why she's really pushing this idea about sweating.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I didn't take that reading, and it's definitely interesting. I'm trying to think whether I prefer it to just the idea that she's just fixated on the fact that she's sweaty and gross, and that it's sort of realistic to be fixated on something that's basically irrelevant when you're in an emergency. I don't know. That kind of rings true to me also. I wonder if it's possible for it to be both. I don't know. That might be a stretch, but I like that interpretation too. Like I think that is very much of a human thing to do, and also a Kenzie thing to do. Yeah.
Is focus on this one insignificant part of her look.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So the three work together. That is Victoria and Kenzie and Darlene, to attach Kenzie's brain interfaced camera helmet to Aiden's head. And his injuries still have not been described, which means we can still imagine them to be maximally horrifying. But at least now he can see and hear and thus communicate.
Yeah, let's hope that this injury never goes described. I think you said last week, oh, well, they'll surely describe it next chapter. And thank God we have not done that. So let's just do that forever.
It's just building up the anxiety, though.
But I mean, I think you're right that we do have two corners of this love triangle teaming up to help the third. And it is this, I think, as horrifying as all this stuff is, once again, it is this moment of, okay, working together, helping each other, supporting each other, leaning on each other, putting aside any awkwardness or uncomfortable thing they have between them to help out the person that they both care about. And that's good.
Yeah.
It's good.
So now we get the first break in this chapter, of which there are several. So what do you think this means, Scott? Why do you think Wildbow's using this structural feature so many times in this chapter?
I mean, I think to me, it's just like a reflection of Victoria's state of mind as we move through the chapter. She's kind of reeling, and her consciousness is like, to me, like only coming into focus during specific scenes where she has a specific goal in mind. I think the jumping from part to part without really linking those together is reinforces this disjointed, broken feeling that's going on right now. You're left like you keep jumping to a new part of a new scene, and in the first couple lines, you're having to catch up with what's going on because it's like you've just jumped into a new scene. You're like, okay, who's she talking to? What's going on now? Who's doing this? And that momentary feeling of confusion and distortion, I think really serves to get the reader into like Victoria's mindset and the tone of the scene.
Yeah, I agree with all that. I was also wondering if maybe it's like, after a certain amount of being tired and overwhelmed, you kind of zone out, and
right.
Like we know Victoria is especially prone to zoning out, but like I wonder if this is part. I mean, this is kind of a different way of saying what you're saying, is like maybe she's actually kind of like spacing out for a second, and then she just feels compelled, like, oh, okay, I guess it's Sveta. I need to go check on Sveta now, and
right.
Like it just kind of, and so we catch up with her when she's doing the next thing, because there was no continuous chain of inner monologue between those two events.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if I'm like over interpreting it, but I see that as being a realistic way of depicting what it's like to be in that state.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think you're right. I think movies use a similar tactic all the time, right? Where they just kind of cut between events in an intentionally abrupt way to make you feel like you're just kind of like floating over everything, and you zone in and focus on one thing and then just kind of drift off and then zone in. Yeah, I mean, it's a great way of showing like the rise and fall of consciousness almost.
Mm-hmm. So after this section break, Victoria is now with Sveta, who's hiding down a hallway so she doesn't kill anyone. And she's more upset than we've seen her in the story because of everything that's happened. And while it didn't hurt her physical body, they destroyed her prosthetic body, which to her is roughly as important. Possibly
even more important.
Mm-hmm.
She says here that she needs to mourn here, which is, I mean, very, very specific language, right? That body is dead. It was part of her and it's dead now. And she's mourning it. And just this simple line that she says, I really liked it. Like just it's so tragic. Like it's awful. And I don't like, I'm so worried about Sveta. And like this, all I could think in the back of my mind during this whole scene is like, oh my God, you just lost the only body you have, and Weld is going to break up with you because you don't have a body, and now you don't even have this prosthetic body, and it's just like, oh my God, and it's really draining.
Yeah. No, like I was actually, I guess, like reflecting on it, I was thinking, like I stopped at this point in the reading and was just like thinking about how much this would suck. And then on a more meta level, since we're doing this analysis, I was like, isn't it kind of amazing that I can have that much empathy for like the person with the lionfish tendril body, who has lost her prosthetic body, which is like a thing that I could, like, it's so unnatural for a human to imagine, but I have no trouble putting myself in her position.
Well, and I think, like, again, this ties back to character work, because you think back to the first scene where Victoria saw Sveta at the therapy group session and saw that she was in a body, and just how like proud of that body Sveta was, and how happy Victoria was for her that she had that. And like, that's, even if you don't consciously recall that as you're reading the scene, it's in your subconscious somewhere, like it's in the back of your mind, because it's part of your image of the character, and that just makes it even all the more heartbreaking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's so much wrapped up in it, and it's it's a terrible thing to happen to her.
Yeah, worth mentioning here before we go on, though, Sveta says, I could have killed them. I had a split second to choose, and I chose not to. Victoria says she made the right call. But we do have to mention this, and we've been doing this throughout the last few chapters, Matt, is this idea of the consequences of holding back or not holding back, what have you. Mm-hmm. And I like that here it's less like the literal consequences, because she makes a good argument. Like, if I had reached out with my tendrils to the whip, it could have snapped them off, and then they would have like gone crazy on their own and maybe hurt people. It's a good reason. But these are not the literal consequences. These are the emotional ones, because Sveta states here, I think I made the right call, but it's hard to know that I could have maybe stopped this, that I could have stopped this from happening, but I chose not to. And I think what this is doing is like laying the seeds for what most of this chapter is doing, is Victoria, as she's taking care of these people, wrestling with this idea that she maybe knows what has to be done now, and she's not sure if she's capable of doing it. Mm-hmm. Which is these people might have to die, and I might have to be the one that does it.
Yeah, right. I mean, it seems too much to ask someone to make that call in a split second, like she says.
Right.
And so now we're putting Victoria in this place where it's not a split second. It's a, when we catch them, is this a fight where I'm going to plan to kill them, which is a completely different state of mind.
Right. And I love that, because she uses the word premeditated here. Mm-hmm. Like, and that's a very powerful word, that she's like, if I decide right now that I'm willing to kill these people and I do kill them later, then that is a premeditated murder in her head. Mm-hmm. And the implications of that on Victoria's whole sense of morality and sense of being a hero is almost too much for her to handle. And that's one of the big things she's wrestling with throughout this entire chapter.
Yeah. And I mean, you could even say that this is a, well, no, I don't think you could say it. I think this is certainly true, is that this is a character moment that's been set up for this entire story.
Yeah.
Like the idea of her being someone who's going to intentionally kill someone in a cape fight is something that I think, whether it was foregrounded or not, was always going to be one of her major like character moments, you know?
Yeah, I think you're right throughout the whole book. But if you look back at this arc specifically, I think we've been leading here throughout the whole arc. Like if we remember, we started this arc with a frustrated Victoria that just didn't understand why things weren't going better. Like she was trying hard and things just kept getting worse, and she was getting more and more frustrated and having to make more and more concessions in the name of hopefully doing the right thing. And now we've taken that person in that state of frustration and thrown them through the ringer. And here they are on the other side with maybe the truth right in front of them, the necessary thing right in front of them.
Yeah. So we continue to move around the room or the rooms. We see Floor is handcuffed to something and her legs are quote unquote stacked near her. She appears to be content with treats from a vending machine.
Yeah, I love that word stacked. I'm glad you pulled that out. That was a very specifically used word in there to give a very specifically horrible image. And it worked perfectly. It just sticks in your brain. I think even before I read this chapter again, that I very distinctly remember reading that part because it's there.
Yep.
And this is, I think, the first moment in the chapter where we see Victoria mention that Floor is held at bay by a stack of treats, that she's being distracted by this stack of vending machine snacks. And then she mentions Juliet has her battery of her phone and that's going to run out eventually. And I think, the gentle worry of these things to me are putting like a self-imposed time limit on our protagonist. She's here, she's trying to collect everyone, but she knows she has to make a choice, and she knows she has to make a choice to a plan, and she knows she has to make it soon, because like the things that are holding some of the people off are not going to last forever. She's put a time limit on herself. What are you going to do, Victoria? What are you going to do? You don't have forever to decide. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I like that. I'm in that place of thinking like, is this one of those moments when we are to believe Victoria's thoughts as point of view character and narrator, or are we meant to question them? Because like thinking about the Heartbroken, like she sort of sees Juliet and Floor as both just like absolutely unpredictable and enigmatic, and like we know that Floor like can be corralled because I'm pretty sure like Imp managed her back when she was being a professional shitfucker upper.
Right.
I don't know. Like, so that's the thing is I'm like, are Juliet and Floor actually as like, hazardous as Victoria's thinking? I don't know. This wasn't something that like distracted me while I was reading, but I am kind of like, she doesn't seem to know how to handle them. So she's almost like, putting up like buffers so that she doesn't have to really interact with them, which is still a mode of taking care of them.
Yeah.
But it's just interesting how she doesn't quite know what their deal is, and so she helps them in a way where she can kind of keep them at arm's length. Right.
She makes sure they're taken care of in a very specific kind of way that doesn't involve her taking care of them. Which you're right is understandable. She doesn't know how to handle these people. She doesn't know them very well.
Right.
She has enough trouble handling the people she does know very well.
Yeah. I'm not blaming her. I was just like trying to figure out like, is she right? maybe she's exactly right.
A little bit. Yeah. I mean, like the thing about the Heartbroken is you can tell that they're all like super agitated, and these guys that were already guys like kind of on the edge, and now that their family has been hurt, and the one thing that they seem to value above all else, even as they joke around amongst each other, is this idea of family. They're going to really want something, and I do think she feels like before all the shock wears off and people are going to be like, okay, it's time to fuck some people up, she needs her mind made up. She needs the plan. And that's kind of something we'll see throughout the rest of the story too, is when she's talking to people on her team, she'll say things like, trust me to come up with a plan. I'm working on it. We'll find a way. And that's like part of like, I think her, simultaneously like putting off making a decision while also like putting it on her that she's going to be the one to come up with. She's going to be the one to decide.
Yeah, no, that's true. I like that dichotomy. That's interesting. So the three teams that they sent to the three locations were red, yellow, and blue, right? I hope I'm right. And weren't those our important symbolic colors, basically? Like we had fire and heat, we had gold and sun, we had ice and water, and we kind of mapped them onto like red. I remember we were never quite sure if like red and gold and orange were all like the same, or if they were discrete symbols that symbolize different things. But there was definitely blue. Blue is its own symbol, and I thought it was interesting that they picked those three colors for the three teams.
Yeah, I mean they're the primary colors, so
I guess they are. They're the primary. Yeah.
No, but I mean, I think that's an interesting line of thinking, though, and I'm sure we could spend 20 minutes like looking at each member of the team and seeing how it breaks down along that line, and if there's anything symbolically interesting there. But it's going to be a long episode already, so I'm going to do that thing where I ask the listeners to do our job for us. So if any of you want to take the time to break that down and see if there's any fun symbolic stuff going on there, go for it. We encourage you guys to do that.
Yeah, and what does it mean that Victoria's team was the only one that didn't get destroyed?
Right. Yeah. I wonder if English teachers ever do that in like class, right? Like an English teacher just like sitting there preparing for school and goes, I wonder if this is like a symbol to, and then they like look at the clock and their stomach rumbles and they're like, I really want a sandwich. You, child student, do this.
Yes.
Find the symbol for me.
I require an essay. I will tell you if you're right or wrong.
I bet they do. Sneaky English teachers.
Yeah. So next she checks in on Byron, who isn't physically injured, but he's still reeling. And it's interesting because you can see he's trying to problem solve, but that it's like halting and he's indecisive because like each tiny decision is so heavy. And Victoria immediately supplies a pillar of leadership detailing what needs to be taken care of in the short term.
Yeah. And going back to our broken section structure, one like you kind of talked about at the very beginning of the chapter, one of the things that those section breaks are doing is kind of allowing Victoria to put on a new metaphorical mask with each person she's talking to and like be whatever or whoever that person needs to help at the time. And no offense to Byron, but he's very new to this whole leadership thing. And it's this weird thing where like people look to Capricorn for leadership because Tristan takes charge so often. So like he's automatically put into this kind of leadership role because people are very used to saying, there's Capricorn, what are we going to do? So Byron finds himself in this role that he's just not very comfortable in. And she is there to kind of help him up and support him with making leadership type decisions on her own.
Right.
It's very like intuitive of her. I really like it.
Yeah. And like, it's interesting because like, I'm really not trying to be hard on him because this is a very understandable reaction to this type of situation. But he just kind of wants to be told what to do. And she is there to be that for him. Right.
Yeah. Well, and I think as we'll see as we go through this chapter, I think there are some things that Victoria wants to be told to do as well.
Yeah. So next is Swan Song. She's missing one leg at the calf. There's another injury to a different leg. One of her prosthetics is damaged. I don't think we know if this is causing misfires or not.
Yeah, not yet, at least.
Yeah, but I mean, it's she's not quite as attached to our prosthetics as Sveta is to her body, but it's like the idea of the prosthetic being damaged is definitely a serious thing for Swan Song.
Yeah, I mean, it is a symbol of the choice that she made to be different from the old damsel.
Yeah. Tristan has apparently, like off screen, endured horrible pain to make a peg leg for Ashley. So,
yeah, I did find it interesting that it specifically points out that was Tristan that did that.
Yeah,
it's poor Byron. He's just overwhelmed.
Right. Well, and that's so like this is one of actually my favorite like moments of the characters taking care of each other. Like you can just like Tristan phasing out just long enough to make like a complicated little peg leg thing that can fit over Ashley's leg and like check that it's okay while, suffering from his body being cut in half. And then like just that scene wasn't even in this, right? Like we didn't see that scene, but I have no trouble imagining everything having to do with what was required to get Ashley a peg leg made out of Tristan rock.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I love this because I want to like use Ashley as a jumping off point to talk about why this chapter works so well. Because we have this moment where Ashley's sitting here and Victoria describes her. She says she sat in a way that had her leaning back, trying to look casual and failing utterly with the darkest of looks in her eye as she surveyed everything around her, the various kids in particular. We also mention here that she's not on any pain medication because she's worried how they will, interact with the medication she's already taking, which is a good reminder that she's on medication still. With this, we saw this way back in the beginning of the Eclipse interlude, but I kind of, in the back of my mind, I don't think we ever talked about this, but wondered like with the whole prison like being destroyed and her kind of just being in this limbo of free, but only because we just can't like put you anywhere type of free. Is she still like getting regular medication? Is she still taking it? And this kind of answers that for us that yes, she is. But I think like Ashley specifically and all of Breakthrough, more broadly, is the reason why this chapter is so emotionally affecting. We talk so much about characters in this book and in this world are so well drawn. And one of the reasons we love the book so much is because they're just really well drawn characters. But just because a character is well drawn doesn't mean that they're going to like behave consistently and be a good character throughout the story. And I don't think we talk about consistency of character enough. This idea that Wildbow's characters never react to the plot in a way that services the plot. They react to the plot in a way that services their character, that they remain consistent and true to who they are. And when I look through how everyone is reacting to this horrible thing that has happened to them, and Ashley specifically here, it's all true to who they are. We know Byron, we know Sveta, we know Lookout, and we know Ashley, and we can see their reaction to this event in a way that is very consistent with what we know about them. I love the darkest looks in her eyes. She's trying to look casual. She's trying to look like she doesn't give a shit. And she's failing. She's failing utterly. That is so true to who Ashley actually is on the inside. And I think the fact that we've learned about these characters and we know about them, and then they behave consistently to these in this manner that we've grown accustomed to, makes them feel more real. So like we talk so much about well-drawn characters, but consistency is almost more important than that, I think, because it doesn't matter how well-drawn it is. If they act completely different a scene later, you've ruined your character. But none of these characters are ever slaves to the plot, especially in this chapter. And that's, to me, why this worked so well.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and just to, and I don't think we're disagreeing at all, but like they do change, but they change in ways that are also organic and in service to their character and the natural evolution of their character's arc and how they would react to the plot in that scenario. Like, I mean, we've like Ashley specifically is one where she's gone from someone who had a certain view of herself and a certain behavioral tendency, and we see her completely differently now, but it's not because she took some absurd, left turn as a character. It's because first we got to know her a lot better in her interludes, and then we saw her exposed to a series of events that reinforce the person she wants to be. Yeah. And this has happened with everyone in Breakthrough. We're at this point in the story. I don't know how far we are from the end. I have no idea.
52.5%.
52.5% from the end or through the story, either one. And like all of the Breakthrough characters are just like people in my brain now. Like
right.
And they're all completely different and complex, and I know how I feel like I know how they would react to every situation. And that's fantastic writing and fantastic storytelling. And I love the story.
It makes emotional moments land, right? Yeah. It does. And I love that you mentioned that consistency of character doesn't mean your characters don't change. Part of consistency of character is that your characters consistently act according to the changes they've gone through. And again, that is what we are seeing with Ashley here. Like we are seeing that like this like shield of badass, uncaring supervillain that she puts up is bullshit, and it's not working, and it's working less than it ever has. She doesn't hide it as well anymore. She doesn't hide the fact that she's looking at all these kids and worried about each and every one of these kids, not just Lookout. She has an attachment to young suffering children because she was a young suffering child. And that is totally true to the Ashley we've grown to love and grown to learn, and the changes that she's gone through.
Yeah. It's interesting. I didn't think about this until now, but for Ashley, losing limbs is fairly blasé. She's
that's true.
She's not so worried about herself, right? Like she's like, oh, whatever. Right. I have had worse. But she's really, really been out of shape about what's happened to the kids. And that's, that's why we love her.
I love it.
So Byron mentions that Vista tried to get in touch, and Victoria manages to view this as a failure on her part, that she left her phone out of sight, and thus she's being an idiot. I thought that was very interesting.
I do think it's funny, though, here that it is phrased in a very specific kind of way. She doesn't just directly call herself an idiot. She doesn't say, Victoria, you idiot. She says, it would be fair for Byron to call her an idiot. She wouldn't disagree with that assessment. And that's just like a really indirect way of calling yourself an idiot in a way that you almost like you want to be punished, but you don't want that. You don't want to beat yourself up. You want other people to be telling you you're wrong. You want someone else out there to be like, no, you're stupid. It's your fault. It's not you wanting to tell yourself that. And I think that's very interesting.
Yeah. I like that. So we see a picture of what Vista has done, and she's completely Vistified Brockton Bay. I like that they use that word, or that Victoria does. The whole city is folded up into a box, like an almost cube, basically a box with only one side open. And apparently like a big chunk of North America has been pulled up to make the city less accessible. Overall, I love it as a description, just like a piece of descriptive writing, and also the awesome thing that it's describing.
Yeah, it's Inception.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's Inception, but somehow it makes Inception look like boring and interesting, because it's like, no, this is way cooler than that.
It's like Inception on crack.
Yes. Finally, we catch up to Valkyrie, and by that I mean the story catches up to Valkyrie's story. So Valkyrie's back, Jessica's back, Bonesaw is not back.
Yeah, what are Bonesaw and Nobug doing, Matt?
I don't know. I'm confused.
Do you think they maybe caught wind of Amy's super happy fun time Cape Land and flew the coop to hang out on Earth S? Do you think that maybe is what happened?
That didn't occur to me, but thanks for putting that in my head. That's good.
It's terrifying, right?
Makes sense, though. I mean,
yeah, it does. Yeah.
Get that little Red Queen Wonderland going.
Uh-huh.
So we get another section break, and Victoria is negotiating with somebody on the phone, angry and frustrated, and she's saying things like, "You're useless." I snarled the words, "completely, utterly fucking useless." And while she's shouting at Citrine, the rest of Team Blue shows up.
Yeah, snarled is a perfect word there. I love that.
Yeah.
But I really like this because throughout the rest of the chapter, we've seen this relatively calm, composed Victoria, right? She's had, what she needs to do to help these people on her brain. She's been dealing with everyone's needs. And then we cut rather abruptly to this moment, and she's just yelling. She's just yelling in the phone. She's pissed off. She's angry. And it's only a bit later that we realize that she's outside now. She's standing in the cold, yelling into a phone, pacing back and forth. And we're like, this is probably what she's wanted to do the entire time, but she just hasn't been able to because she doesn't want to do that in front of everyone in the school that's suffering right now.
Yeah, right. I don't know if we've ever seen her this just like enraged. I mean, yeah, she's done things out of anger before, but this is just the rage venting of someone who is past the point of caring, like, because she's just someone who thinks a lot about appearances and weighs words and thinks about like the way people are saying things, and she's just going off on the mayor, and it's great.
Yeah, and Citrine is still playing this kind of like old school, like, we can't be seen to take sides, and it's like this very old school kind of gamesmanship of this stuff, and Victoria is so beyond that now. It's like, what more do you have to see? They're chopping children up. what takes the government getting involved in this thing beyond children being chopped into pieces?
Right.
And I mean, I'm kind of with her on that. It's like this bullshit. New Cauldron sucks. They suck. Beaker, is that what you called them?
Beaker.
Fucking Beaker.
I don't know if I called them that, but yeah. So eventually Citrine agrees to further impede the finances of the Cradle aligned villains by using Numberman's skills. And then also that she won't extend any favors to Cradle, which is like the most limp possible.
It's such
like,
bullshit.
yeah, I won't help them.
We promise not to help the bad guys.
Yeah. And then she mentions that she and Numsy are being targeted, which I guess is why they're not helping actually.
Yeah. I mean, like I was just ranting about them, but I do think they're in a kind of shitty position, you know, like there's so many things they're trying to balance, and like they've got this contingent of anti-cape humans that are probably just getting worse as things continue to get worse. And it's like, it's not, I don't want to make it seem like it's easy for them to just be like, no, we have to help out immediately, give full support to this thing. But it's still incredibly frustrating.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's just not the way that anyone Cauldron adjacent has ever seen things. Where they're just like, look, we've got our eye on like the continuation of the human race. We can't be bogged down, even if there is some horrible injustice. These are not literally the same people, but sort of overlapping with the same people who let Grey Boy and Valkyrie run around and Siberian because they were like, well, they could help us later, you know. So yeah,
sure, yeah. So. It's the kind of pragmatism that like it's just like fuck you, like I don't. It's like you might be right, but it's really annoying me.
Right, I still get to yell at you. Right.
Yeah, right.
Victoria asks for permission from Citrine to do what's necessary, and Citrine won't give it. So let's talk for an hour about why Victoria is asking for this. Yeah,
so this is the first time she has made audible the thing that she's probably been thinking about throughout this entire chapter so far. This idea that she needs to take this step. And I love how this is written. You don't need permission for that, Antares. No, but I want it. And that's the most complicated thing about this decision. And I think so, probably what we're going to be spending most of our time on the rest of this chapter talking about, that she wants someone to tell her whether this is okay or not. This is probably one of the hardest decisions she's ever had to make in her life. And she continually reaches out to other people in positions of assumed authority to try to get them to make it for her. If I can't do this, tell me no, and then I won't do it. Or tell me I can. Just tell me what to do.
Yeah, we were talking about how this is kind of both a manifestation of her reaching out for what the law says in this like Wild West epoch where the law is unclear, and so she's asking the mayor, who sort of represents the law.
That old mantra, yeah.
And also the second part of the mantra of reaching out to other people, because she asks Citrine here, and then, in the next bit, Natalie's here. So Natalie and Victoria have a conversation, and Victoria like can't get her head around Natalie. And I think it's really great writing to be able to take the perspective of two people who are talking past each other like this, because basically Victoria offers her an out and says like, I'll still respect you. I hope you will want to lend a hand, but I'll still respect you if you opt out of this one. And then this segues into Victoria asking Natalie to sign off on murdering the villains, because while Natalie is not even a lawyer, I guess she represents the law in Victoria's mind.
Yeah. Matt, this is the most frustrating part of this chapter to read for me, because I'm like, Victoria, she's not saying any of the things that you're thinking she's saying.
Yeah.
It's so absurd. Like she starts off the chapter like she sees Natalie and goes, before you make any firm judgments, like automatically like on the defensive, like assuming that Natalie isn't going to come to a conclusion that she likes. And Natalie's response to that is just like, look, I have to try to stay objective in this, as objective as possible. And I think Natalie, my assumption in that statement is her not saying like, I don't want to go up there, I don't want to see it, I have to stay objective, and therefore I'm separating myself from the horror. To me, that's just like, I have to stay objective, stop trying to convince me of the point that you want, right? Like, stop trying to convince me that your way is the right way. Let me observe objectively and then come to my own conclusion. But it's automatically like, oh, so you don't want to be involved. You don't want to come up. You don't want to see it. That's fine. You've earned being unreasonable. Like that's what she's almost saying to her.
Yeah.
Like you've earned putting up your It's Complicated art. You've earned being unreasonable because of that one thing that you did. And Natalie's like, that's not what I'm doing. Like, listen to me. I'm not doing that thing. Like what you're accusing me of doing, I'm not doing it. And it's like this, it's so frustrating. It's like, I mean, it's like wonderful writing because I think it's perfectly frustrating.
Yeah, right. It's frustrating in a way where you're basically just like, and it shows how out of sorts Victoria is, that she's not able to like have insight into just like what Natalie's trying to do here. She's like, all right, Natalie's like, this is a terrible situation. My job here is to provide them with their legal advice and give them the accurate call on whether they should go kill this guy, right? Like not like morally should you go kill this guy, but if you go kill this guy, what are the odds that your whole team is going to go to prison for it, right? Like that.
Yeah.
So and Victoria's almost asking for like a moral judgment, and Natalie's like, that's not why I'm here. I'm here to make an objective decision. Yeah. And,
right.
Yeah.
And none of at no time in any of that conversation from Natalie's side does she say, ergo, I can't go up there. I can't help them. In fact, she says she wants to be involved. She just doesn't want to be overly involved. She doesn't want to get too far into it. That doesn't mean not going up there. It doesn't mean not helping them out. It doesn't mean observing the things that have happened. But to Victoria, that's the assumption. That's what she means. And she's like, and I love that Precipice kind of like jumps in on this, right? Like she's saying, I'm not saying you're being unreasonable. And Precipice is like, you kind of are though. And this is not the first time that Rain has kind of stepped in and told Victoria she was being unreasonable. We've seen this before, and I kind of enjoy him in this role. Like this role is like, actually, Victoria, you kind of are being unreasonable right now, or you are doing the thing that you're saying you're not doing. Yeah.
I enjoy the increasingly backbone showing Precipice.
Yeah, but I mean, look at this part at the end of this, like, if you don't want to look at the scene, again, let's Natalie has never once in this conversation said, I don't want to look at the scene. Let's make this important.
Right.
If you want to give your opinion without knowing the whole why, you've earned that. It's unfair, but you've earned the right to be a little unfair. If you want to give that input, then yeah, I'll listen. We'll listen. The rest of Breakthrough, I think. Just don't be unfair about it and call it fair. I don't think I'd be comfortable going this extra mile in any premeditated way if either you or the mayor said no. Which is interesting because she kind of just like transitions to tell me I can murder him from this. She's like, it's just like a really abrupt, like, like she's ranting at her about how like she's trying to be fair in her rant. It's saying like, you've earned this. It's you've earned this being unfair about this, blah, blah, blah. Even though I don't think that's what Natalie's saying. But then she's suddenly like, tell me I can do this,
right?
Or can't do this.
Yeah, and I like the euphemism of going the extra mile for murdering someone.
Yeah,
I'm going to use that in my personal life now.
Yeah.
Anytime I refer to going the extra mile, you can assume I mean killing someone.
Yeah. And I mean, it is interesting that like, I hope you don't use that very often. It is interesting that like if either you or the mayor say no, then I won't do it. And once again, I have to, in the back of my mind, assume that what she kind of wants in this situation, what she will never say out loud, but she kind of wants is tell me I can't do it. Tell me no. Tell me you don't agree with it. Tell me not to do it. Because I feel like I have to. I feel like I'm going to get to this place where I have to do this. And I really don't want to. But I want someone to tell me no. Or at least to tell me I have permission. Just make that choice for me because I can't. Yeah. Or I can, but I'm trying as hard as I can to not make it my decision.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's worth stepping back and saying like Victoria's clearly like compromised at this point. Like right. Emotionally, I don't even think it would be entirely wrong to say that what she wants is at least partly revenge. Partly this is about like putting down a mad dog. Like this is the kind of situation where back in the day there would have been an official kill order, someone on the order of the Slaughterhouse 9 or whatever. The heroes would agree, yeah, this is a person who is so bad that they need to be taken out. But the problem is that the structure that would give her that license is gone.
Right.
So she's in this place of saying, well, I think they're a mad dog that needs to be put down, but I also just really want to kill them for entirely personal reasons.
Yeah.
And she's far too emotionally just completely destroyed to be able to, like, she can't sit down and journal on this to try to figure out which of her motives is actually driving her here, you know?
So I think it makes it so much easier if someone else makes that call.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. And then the conversation ends not with Natalie giving her what she wants, right? She doesn't say Natalie doesn't say no or yes. She just like finally at the very end of this conversation, Victoria like realizes, she says she's, oh, I just put myself in your shoes. Oh, good. It's great that's the first time you did this at the very end of this conversation. And I realize that what I'm asking you to do here is completely unreasonable and crazy.
Right.
And I've put you in this terrible situation. So just leave. You can leave if you want to, or you can go up. And she chooses to go up, of course, because I think that's what Natalie was always going to do. I mean, there's a reason she's here. She didn't come here to just stand outside.
Right. I mean, just at the risk of stating the obvious, like this isn't a man, Victoria sucks session. This is a what the text is doing is showing that Victoria is like falling apart. Like she just got off the phone screaming at someone, and now Natalie shows up and she just kind of does what is really kind of a like discursive, rambling, incoherent like sequence of statements to Natalie that like jump between topics and aren't clear, and make all kinds of assumptions. So it's like the point is we're just seeing how she's doing, you know, and she's doing poorly.
And she has been historically rough on Natalie more than a lot of other people, and I think that is internally consistent here.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So Foyle chooses to hang back and keep watch because the horrific things have just been wearing on her too much. Yeah, you're supposed to get numb to them, right? Yeah. Nope. Not something like this. Yeah. And then I love that this is just its own line by itself. Precipice followed me inside. Like no conversation needed. Of course he will. Yep. So they have an interaction where Precipice walks through the logic with her, verifying that he's not just being selfish in thinking that turning himself in is not a good idea. Yeah, I love Rain. I love that he would even feel that way. Like that he would have this internal worry that's like, I don't want to turn myself in, but is that just me acting selfishly, or is that actually acting within, does that make sense within the best interest of our group? I love that he's worried about that behavior. This moment where he even feels like he might be acting selfishly, he checks with Victoria. I love that so much. Yeah. And this is another beat of Victoria saying, we'll figure something out. She promises him, we'll figure something out. The first time she did this was to Sveta, and we're seeing it here again. But Victoria, I think, knows what she needs to do, and she's just trying to work up to it. And she's putting it all on her. Don't worry about it, Rain. You don't have to worry about making the decision. We will figure something out. I will do this for you. I will take this. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So Rain suggests attacking the enemy during the mandated nightly cluster sleep. Yeah, it isn't explicitly stated here, but I think one of the implications of that strategy is that it could move from killing the enemy to killing the sleeping enemy, which has implications. Yeah, that's a little bit harder. I mean, at least if they're sleeping, there's a greater chance of catching them unawares and just capturing them. But yeah, you know, got to do what you got to do. Yeah. Inside, kill him. Yeah. Inside, everybody else seems to be providing this fantastic mutual support network now that the other Heartbroken have arrived. Kenzie's relieved to have Natalie there. Juliet is calm to have Aroa there. And the text says, situations like this could bring out the worst in us. Rain joined Lookout, bending down to see how the camera had been set into place. Aiden raised a hand to bump fists with Rain, a relatively small hand meeting a smaller mechanical hand. Not just the worst in us.
This is, I think, when the chapter starts to go from just a really, really good chapter to a really, really great chapter. Like we talked about at the beginning, throughout all of this so far, everything has seemed dire, hopeless. Victoria's wrestling with this decision, trying to figure out what to do next, while still struggling to help everyone. And then we have this moment where all the teams come together. Red, blue, and yellow have all come to join again in one. Which, remember when they had the idea to split up to begin with? How bad of a fucking idea was that?
Yeah.
Anyway, all parts of this team have come together, and they're supporting each other. They're helping each other. And I think the tone in the chapter starts to shift a little bit. I mean, there's still this dire implication of the choice that Victoria either has already made and knows it, or is still working towards making. But under this is this people supporting each other, like you've been talking about. And I just find it so wonderful. In the midst of this darkness, like situations like this could bring out the worst in us, but not just the worst in this. Situations like this can bring out the best in us too. And I love that idea. I love it.
Yeah. And we've been seeing that the whole time. And then we see even more of it before the end here.
Yeah.
So there's a very interesting little section here. The first part of which Victoria tries to communicate with Tattletale's, I guess, whatever her arm is attached to. Tattletale's using a language of symbols and probably Greek letters. Apparently the team is just taking turns acting as her amanuensis.
I know what that is because I just watched Cloud Atlas.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like you and I could take like a long time processing what we think these symbols mean. I know there's already a whole lot of speculation over on the Parahuman subreddit, and I think this analyzing gets all the more difficult because Victoria like doesn't describe things like exactly what they are. Like there are Greek symbols in here, there are mathematical symbols in here, and she doesn't describe them as such. Also, I have no idea what a gun check is. I don't know what that is. But I think the real important part of this is not the real important part as of now. I'm sure these symbols are telling Victoria exactly what she should be doing and what she should not be doing. And we'll see if that blows up in her face or not. But there's this one moment at the end of this that says there was no point to this, no pattern, and no way I could bring myself to give up, because giving up meant going back out there, and then she cuts herself off. Yeah. And what, Matt? And facing the choice that she has to make, and facing the knowledge that she's probably gonna have to kill someone.
Yeah, or you know, basically she's checked in with everyone, right? So it's now she has to. She's done that part, right? Now it's time for the next bit. Well, and also I guess my thought was on some level like I need a break from dealing with all those people. I don't know if that really scans though, because she's still dealing with someone. She's dealing with Tattletale, but in a way that doesn't really require her resources.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tattletale's the last one. So like, she walks out of this room, the taking care of part is over. The next step part has begun, and she's not quite ready for that yet. Yeah.
Just briefly, like the code thing is interesting because like why wouldn't she just like write letters, right? So like there's something interesting going on here. Like it beyond just what is she trying to communicate? Why is she using a code at all? You know, it's interesting, and I'm sure we'll find out. But
does she even know it's Victoria at the other end of this?
Yeah, I mean that was one I think that was one thought, was like she's giving it in code because she doesn't know who might actually be receiving this message, and she doesn't think it would be good if just like some random person receives it. I don't know.
Is it to foil, and it just so happens that the only person that's not inside is the one person that needs to see this?
Right. So, but then, you know, I think at like just the right time, just as she's struggling with being unable to like move forward, her parents show up and Carol moms the fuck up and just silently gives her daughter a hug.
Oh my God. Talk about manipulating your emotions, right? Like she's in this terrible situation, and we'll learn later that, her talking to Tattletale in this moment is Tattletale's arm that's just sitting in a sink that's like making symbols on her, right? Like it's not, it's just like a little, it's like the piece is like so much smaller and more horrifying than you would think. But we see Carol and we're like, oh, fuck. Because like she just was on the phone with Citrine and like screaming at her and a mess. And she just kind of was agitated in her conversation with Natalie. And then here's Carol to fuck up the day. And thank Christ it doesn't happen. Thank God Carol, at least in this moment, listens. And of course, Victoria begs her to, basically. She says, not now. She says, all this stuff, I will talk to you about all this stuff later, but now, just now, don't. And, okay, we don't know for a fact that Carol was going to walk in the door and say, all right, let's talk about Amy. Probably not, but the important part here is not whether or not Carol was going to do that. The important part here is Victoria communicates what she needs, and Carol listens to that without questioning it and supports her. And good job, Carol. Do more of that. Yep.
It's great. It's wonderful. I got nothing really to add there. It's just like you're afraid it's gonna not go that way, and then you're like, finally a good, just like wholly good Carol moment where there's really nothing about it where I want to be like,
yeah, you're right. There's really nothing you can go, well, I mean, it looks good, but yeah.
So the next section, the paramedics have arrived and been briefed. Victoria has suggested that Sveta subject herself to Rain's power to gain more control.
I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know.
Right. But what's funny, I mean, Victoria also doesn't know. Like she's like, it's like really bad. It's like really like, I don't know. And Sveta's like, it's always really bad. So why not try it?
True. But we also know that it was really bad for Victoria, who was presumably feeling a lower level version of it due to her resistance.
Yeah.
It seems to me like a very temporary solution. Like it temporarily allows her to get control of her body in this moment where she has no suit to go into and nothing to contain her. But it feels like this could have long-term repercussions. Like this could really, like she's already in a really bad place, and this could really, really fuck her up. And that it scares the shit out of me.
Maybe it'll be better because she's receiving the full dose.
Sure,
that's how things work in this world.
Yep.
Now Mark hangs out with Candy, and when she rebuffs his approach, he starts rolling a ball to her, one of his little light grenades. I just love it, like this fantastic way of sharing space and sharing human connection with the person, but giving them physical space.
Right.
And then in a little bit, Victoria and Juliet join the ball passing game, and let's talk about this for hours too.
Yeah, this was the most emotionally affecting scene of the entire chapter to me.
Yeah.
This is really, really wonderful. And I think it's wonderful for a few I think, first of all, one of the big deals is we're using a power in a non-combat way. Like this is a power used solely to support here in this moment. And that's not something we see very often. We've talked a lot about how the powers are very combat focused, and it's not something you see every day is power used in that manner. And then like you've been talking about all chapter, this is people coming together and supporting each other. And it's just this silent, no words spoken, just back and forth support.
Yeah.
And it's just like the image is wonderful. The fact that it's a mix of people, that Mark is there, that it's two of the heartbroken, Victoria and Mark, like a mixture of teams, people that don't even know each other. Mark does not know this girl at all. Mark probably has barely any idea who Candy is as a person. He sees a person that needs help. He tries to help. He's rebuffed. And instead of just saying like, well, fine, fuck you, he just refocuses how his help is delivered.
Yeah.
And that is what people need, and that is how you can help people, and that is this group of people coming together, and it's beautiful, it's wonderful, it works, it does to me everything it's supposed to do, and I feel all glowy just thinking about it.
This is a great like Mark moment for me because and I don't know if you agree, and I don't know if this was intended, but like this is where my head went immediately. What was like, Mark is a veteran cape, and this is probably not even the first time he's done this.
Probably not. Yeah.
Like this like just being a first like a cape is in some sense a first responder. So like how many times has he had to be there for people who were just experiencing the worst day of their life or some massive loss, and this is, and like, yeah, maybe he did just think of this use of his power, but maybe this is just what he does with kids, where this is the level on which a kid maybe needs emotional support. I mean, it reminded me immediately of like, this is a great way to connect with a small child. Like you can't ask a small child like to tell you about their day. You can roll them a ball and have an interaction with them on that level. And there's something very healing, I think, about just engaging on the level of like basically a child level. Yeah. I think it's very positive.
I agree. I love it. I love it to death.
Yep.
I'm so glad it's in this chapter.
And I'm glad you mentioned that it's using a power for a non-combat application, because like in a time like this, maybe it helps for these people to be made to feel a little bit less like weapons after this thing has happened to them using powers.
I mean, and that's what they're like. Nothing in this chapter, like there's no fighting in this chapter, physical fighting. There's no combat. This is just people as people, not even as capes for the most part, supporting each other. Yeah. Yeah. So there's this beat in here where we're reminded that Victoria's foot is injured to the point where she's just flying everywhere now. Yeah, that's a good. It's a good thing to bring up for sure. Yeah. And so here we have a section where I don't think I actually parsed it right the first time. So she's calling Jessica Yamada's phone, and she's like being hung up on basically. And then she dials the same number using Juliet's phone, and the call goes through to the answering machine. And then she uses her own phone again, and the call is terminated again. Immediately. It doesn't even ring. Right. Yeah. So the conclusion is that Jessica or somebody is screening her calls specifically. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's exactly right. And she tries to reach out to Jessica and is rebuffed specifically. The best psychiatrist in the world is back. They're back. Our team needs them now more than ever. And she ignores them. Yeah. Well, and yeah. It's funny because it puts you in the same space as I imagine Victoria to be, where you're like, why? Right. But I love that that's Victoria's reaction is why. But her reaction is like, I could probably come up with excuses for her and reasons. And it probably makes logical sense. But I'm just too tired right now. I just don't want to. I can't right now. She just knows that she doesn't have Jessica. And you have to assume here that like the question that she's been asking other positions of authority all throughout this chapter. She asked the mayor, she asked Natalie, who not a perfect representation of the law, but someone who has showed objective decision-making in the past. And then she goes to her therapist, tell me what to do. Tell me that I can or can't do this. Someone tell me. And kind of for the third time, she doesn't get the answer. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great point that like she's almost teased with this idea that like, oh, thank God Jessica's back at this. Jessica's back. She'll tell me what to do. Yeah. Finally, someone is here to tell me what to do. Right. At this ultimate low moment. Thank God I can get an out. I don't have to make the decision. Yeah. And then nope, it's robbed from her because Jessica's not answering the phone, and it's like even worse now. Yep. So the chapter ends with Ashley stating that the Annihilation Sisters will be joining the attack. Is that what we're calling them now? It just seemed fitting in this moment. Okay. And Victoria overlooks her wobble and lets her rest leaning against her shoulder. Yeah, so she was going to tell her, you can't come because you're not strong enough. And she wobbles, but she lets her come anyway. Yeah, and I love the image of her overlooking the wobble and then providing the shoulder to lean on. Yeah, because she understands that Ashley needs this, basically. Yes. Yeah. And then chapter ends. We had the verdict from Natalie. We had the opportunity. We had the motive. The means, we would see if we had the means. And I was just like, I couldn't help but laugh at that because she's means, motive, and opportunity and verdict are all words you associate with a murder. She's already convicting herself.
She's convicting herself of a murder, and she's convicting it from such a cop point of view.
Yeah.
It's just I love framing it that way so much.
Yeah, she hasn't even done it yet, and she's already building the case against herself.
Yeah. No, I adore that.
Yeah. And also I find that line interesting though. We had the verdict from Natalie. Because again, we didn't see Natalie weigh in on this. And I guess maybe the assumption is it happened in between one of the section breaks, but I feel like that something like that would be important enough for Victoria to comment on it, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if that just like the verdict is I'm not going to tell you you can or can't.
Right. Yeah, maybe. That could be it.
But yeah, it is wonderful that that's how we frame. She's made this. She's basically made the choice at this point, I think, because she's describing it as a murder. That is symbolically to me saying I'm going to kill one or more of these people. I'm going to do it. We are going to do it. That's the choice that we have now, and the only question is whether or not we have the ability to.
Yeah, I mean, basically saying we have the motive is a way of saying we want to. We're gonna. Right.
We have the opportunity.
Yeah.
We're gonna.
Yeah,
we just got to see it. We just got to see if we have the means, if we're capable.
We
of
actually
doing
can manage it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Whoa, that was just one chapter.
Yeah, that was one chapter. Wraps up.
So normally 11. we've wrapped up an arc, Matt. Normally we do a post arc summary, but looking at the time, we are at an hour and 20 minutes into this podcast, and we have a whole other giant long chapter to go. So I don't think we're going to be doing our normal like arc summary. I think we kind of hit on it on the beats that I wanted to say when we were talking the chapter. This idea that we started off with a very frustrated, confused Victoria who doesn't understand why things keep getting worse and why things are going this way. And by the end of the chapter, we have a Victoria who has decided to kill someone. That is the arc in my mind.
Right. The observing her own escalation.
Yes.
Into the same frame of mind that she's been resisting through this whole story, actually. Yep. All right. 12.z. And we'll just set aside why it's called that, I guess, for now. I mean, okay, so like it could be a few things, right? Like, first of all, we're dealing with time. Time powers. March is going to mess with time loops and other time fuckery. Maybe when you mess with time, things get out of order. There's also the fact that space in Brockton Bay is folded back on itself, beginnings folded onto endings. So there's a lot of reasons why it could be that this is 12.z.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of speculation going around. At the time of writing the script on Tuesday, the chapter had not been released yet. So we are living in a world now where we know the arc titled name. We know we've gotten another chapter which allows us to start drawing a pattern. But regardless, you're right that we've never quite started an arc like this before. We've never not known the name of the arc as we moved into it. We've never started on a Z interlude. We never started on an interlude period. So I think you're spot on that we're doing something different with structure, and we're dealing with time bubbles and loops and a character in this interlude who is like a time master. So it's not too much of a stretch to extrapolate that we're going to be doing some time trickery here. And I'm really excited about it.
Yeah, me too.
And I think like looking at this, I think this is a good way to say, I think Wildbow's been experimenting with structure throughout the story a little bit, right? He's done different things than he's done in the past. It's much less rigid to a certain kind of structure. We've done a whole interlude in the halfway in between another interlude with Eclipse. We've done multiple interludes throughout chapters, or throughout arcs. Like we've had 3 or 4 interludes throughout the arc. There's structure being explored with here. And I think this is really cool because I think it's a reflection of like confidence. Like I know my set structure and now I'm going to experiment with it. Now I'm going to see, all that this format has to offer. And it's using also serialized storytelling to do interesting things. To a person reading Ward 2 years from now, suddenly waking up on a Saturday and seeing 12.Z is not going to have as much of an effect. But for us, the people reading it live with the story as it's published, it's like this holy shit, what's going on moment. And I think it like this shocking, exciting, interesting shift in how the story is told is using the serialized medium to its fullest effect, its fullest potential. And I love it. Love it.
Right. And every single one of these structural deviations, I guess, from like the standard pattern is making some particular point, right? Like we're going to eventually understand why this is 12.Z, you know?
Sure. Yeah.
We're not going to walk away from Ward being like, why did he do that one thing where he started a chapter with an interlude and but it should have been 11.Z, like, or it should have been like they're going like it always ends up making sense, right?
Right.
Like Eclipse, like we talked about that forever, you know. Yeah. So it's obvious.
I was convinced it was a typo. I really was. It was like, oh, he put 12, he got ahead of himself. It's 11. Here we go. End of the arc.
Yeah.
Nope.
But no, I mean, yeah, I just love this aspect of the meta of the storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool. It's exciting. It builds a unique experience for the readers that are reading as it's released. And I think that's exciting. And that's one of the things I was most looking forward to covering in this story is this experience of reading a book as it is being written and published to me.
Yeah. Although I guess some of these interesting kind of funny things can be incorporated later, like the fact that Imp's interlude was never linked in the table of contents because he kept forgetting. So yeah. So this chapter interlude, May is our point of view character. She's waiting for the train with her mother. We learn from her thoughts that she and her mother are Japanese refugees from the Kyushu attack of Leviathan. Her mother fidgets, touching her constantly, kissing her head, smoothing her hair and clothes. And May mentions that they'll be late, which is the first distinct mention of time, prompting her mother to momentarily remove her focus from her daughter and onto the clocks that are within sight.
So let's just not be coy here, Matt. This is March. This is March, and there is a wonderful sense of irony that her chosen name was May, her chosen cape name is March, which has so many different meanings. First of all, they're months in the year, which links to her obsession with time. Of course, then we have the link to the March hare, which is something we talked about in the past. And in Alice in Wonderland, the March hare is known to be crazier in March and less crazy in May. That's what Alice in Wonderland says. So here we have a slightly less crazy version of March in Little May. And of course, the first words that May, aka March, aka the March hare, says is, "We're going to be late," which is so on the nose that I can't help but love it. And I want to make sure you get the credit that you deserve, Matt, because you speculated to me last week, before this chapter came out, that March's trigger event would have something to do with her being late for a very important date. And you weren't 100% correct here. You know, it wasn't exactly how you planned it out, but it was like a good 80%.
Yeah. I'm giving myself a low B at this point because my thought was the trigger was going to essentially be like she's late for something and it's such an important thing that the being late like ruins her life. And that's not really what it is. Like right. the being late is part of the trigger event. Yeah. But it's not it has probably more to do with the horrific death of her mother. I'm gonna just stretch out in that direction. But yeah. No, I was moderately pleased with myself despite it not being a Scott level accurate prediction.
Oh, come on, one time.
So nearby, a gaggle of teenagers does teenagery things. Note this first fixation on the specific word teenager and the concept of classifying people by their age, which is something that she does consistently. She also thinks specifically that the guy they're catcalling might be 2 years older. Again, hyper conscious of time and relative age.
I'm glad you pointed this out because this is everywhere in this chapter, right? May's attention paid to dates, times, numbers, that kind of thing. It's everywhere. It's constant. Whenever a new person comes into a scene that doesn't have a name, they're described as the 20-something one, or the oldest one, that kind of thing. And it is so true to her character, and it starts here at the beginning, even before she triggers.
Yeah. It's much like Victoria looks at everyone's fashion. March is entirely conscious of just their age, their relationship with time.
Yep.
She sees who we can assume is Lily, who she thinks of as fun girl. I just absolutely love that language for some reason. May desperately wants to be Lily in this moment instead of herself. And she thinks at length about how overwhelming and suffocating her life is and how she wants to just escape.
Yeah. Once again, I think, and throughout this entire arc, and why I fell in love with it after I started really studying it, is Wildbow is doing some very specific things with language and writing here. On the surface, this allusion to wearing Lily's clothes is a direct reference to wearing her skin, which we see later in the chapter. So what starts as like a slightly uncomfortable desire turns into like an all-out obsession a little bit later. But there's more than that going on here. Like first of all, we also show Lily as fun girl, which is something I don't think anyone has ever described Foyle as ever, which again, I think is setting up some very specific personality changes that are going to happen after their trigger. And then he has his point of view character referencing fairy tales. The narration of this text a lot of times is almost like sing-songy and dropping very loaded words like mad desire. And that like listen to this sentence, like, it was a moment that struck her as profound. The kind of moment she imagined would be with her forever. This, like, we've been reading Wildbow's books for 2 years now, right? This is not the typical kind of voice he writes his stories in. This is something stylistically different, and it's different intentionally. We're doing this kind of like, even, and we're gonna ramp it up when we actually get to March. But even in the May sections, there's this kind of like different oddness to how she sees the world, and it's reflected in how the narration is doled out to us. Especially like, and it comes off even more odd when it's like layered on top of this story that is ostensibly horrible. This poor little girl that is being like completely controlled by her very overbearing mother. And it's so strange and wonderful.
Yeah. You know, some of my favorite Wildbow interludes across all three of his stories that I've read now, and can say that, are what you might call like xenofiction, where it's like the perspective of a entity that is not human.
Right.
There's several in Worm. There's been the Dot interlude in this story. You know, there's Scion, obviously. There's ones in the other stories. I bring this up to say, like, the March interlude here reminds me more of those than it does of a typical like Wildbow always writes, like, he always gives characters their own voice and their own things they're fixated on, and their own everything that's going on with them. But this one, like, March is just so unhinged in such an interesting and unique way that it reminds me more of his, like, trying to write like a really bizarre mind that's nothing like my mind, and pulling it off in a way where I'm like, yeah, I can kind of see how that would be, actually.
Right. Yeah.
So her mom says, "I'm so proud of you. I know you're going to be great if we aren't late. Are you still visualizing the singing?" "Yeah, I murdered the time when I ran through it with Miss B."
So on top of this being a very specific word used, like murdering the time is very specific to like an illusion of whatever the hell she's hoping to do in the future. This is a literal specific Alice in Wonderland like illusion. The Queen of Hearts accuses the Mad Hatter of murdering time when he's performing a song. Like, he performs a song so badly he murders time. That's why in Alice in Wonderland time is stuck at 6, so they're always having tea. The Mad Hatter and the March Hare. So that's a very specific Alice in Wonderland reference. Also, again, I have to point out, like, the sing-songy nature of this, right? Like, I know you're going to be great if we aren't late. Like, it's so off in just the most wonderful way.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it so much.
Yeah. So she sees Lily's sister and her boyfriend approach the platform. We know this because Lily told us her trigger event earlier. And they begin haranguing Lily, but the whole episode is filtered through May's exhaustion with her life, how she can't even like feel bad for homeless people because her life is so relentless that she would trade places with him because at least he's free.
Yeah, the homeless man, we should say, ends up being Homer, the third number of their cluster. I know, like, I like May has individual moments with each of these people, right? Like the people that end up in her cluster, she sees Lily Foyle, and she says, like, she has this moment with her where they like lock eyes, and she's got this really obsessive, like, I want your life moment. And then she kind of does the same thing with Homer here. Like she sees him and she looks at him as, despite all the terrible things that he probably has to go through, she sees him and his life as freedom. And I think we're going to circle back to this, like the reason why I think this is very explicitly done here right before her trigger event as we get further into the story. But I wanted to point it out here because she does have very specific, like, focused moment with each of these people.
Yeah. That's a good point. Yeah. So eventually May's mother is pushed off the edge of the subway platform by the scuffle, and the mother pulls her over the edge as she falls.
Yeah, and the text says, because there was no reality where she wouldn't let go of May, which is a really nice little touch there.
Yeah.
So I hate to sound like a broken record here, Matt, but once again, I have to point out the ways in which the voice here is so different from the usual kind of narrative voice in the story, because the text says, all the emotions that had been brimming inside of May were left standing behind her like a cloud of dust after a cartoon character was whisked away. I mean, this is not how, like... We're definitely not in Victoria's head, definitely not in Taylor's head, but it's not just that, it's the other interludes as well. This is not how the book is written. It's distinctly different, and it's intentional.
Yeah. Well, it's this like hypercharged, I don't know, like the thing is I both see this as like a unhinged, crazy kind of mindset, and also can kind of relate to like feeling this way when I was like 14, where like everything is hyper important and every moment is relevant, and you're at that age where like every movie is life changing and so deep, and everything is so deep, and every personal relationship you have is so important, and so I can relate to feeling that way.
Sure. Yeah. I think that's a general like teenager thing that you feel like, because you're experiencing these emotions for the first time ever. And it's like, oh my God, this is it.
So it's like all of that, except bottled up into these tiny little moments for May, because she has no freedom to express these feelings. So it's like hyper distilled in these moments.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost as if the only method of expression is through her internal narrative. Mm-hmm. So that narrative is more personally her than some of the other characters we've had interludes for.
I like that. Yeah, I like that. So May's first concern is that her wrist is hurt and she can't play violin. Or maybe that's a backwards way of phrasing it. Maybe she's actually grateful for her wrist being hurt. Her mom tries to lift her up, but May wastes time first saving her violin instead of herself.
Yeah. And I think that's the wonderful thing about this is I think it is both. She's worried and nervous about the fact that she can't play violin, and that she senses freedom because she can't play violin. Because you're right, she does save that violin. One of the first things she does is pick up her violin off the tracks. Her mom picks her up, and instead of saving herself, she tosses the violin to safety first. And there's this moment where she questions it too, like in her internal monologue. It's, why did I do that? And I think that's one of the fascinating contradictions of this character, that like she's had this beaten into her so much. And I don't mean physically beaten into her. I hope not. I don't know. Beaten into her so much that she carries it out without really thinking about it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think we will talk about the fact that the power that she gets is basically her mom in her head forever. Like it's the schedule.
Thanks, Shard.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So she slips aside and into an alcove without saying anything, leaving her mother confused and unable to find her.
Yeah, and I think we need to make sure that it's explicit that she's fully aware that she's doing this, right?
Yeah.
She is, by not reaching out to her mom, she's kind of dooming her to get hit by the train. This is really clear in the text. Like she says, like it's a calculated, maybe not entirely conscious, but she's aware that by doing this, by hiding, by not shouting out to her, by waiting, she's doomed her mom to death.
Yeah, and like there's the moment. And I don't think I even really caught it on the first read through, but there's the moment like just before the train hits her mom when they actually make eye contact.
Yeah.
And basically the text is like she wasn't sure that she had done the right thing. And that to me underlines like that she absolutely did it on purpose.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which was really kind of dark.
Oh, it's very dark. It's very dark. And I love this part. She might have imagined it, but it seemed to her that as the train hit all the other people, it paused for just a hair, a single tenth of a tick of a clock. I love that.
Yeah.
First of all, we're using hair in a loaded way again because we're March hare. I know it's a different kind of hair, but the intent is still there. Yeah. I think.
I love the language in that whole part, like the train. Just the rivets in the metal on the side of the train grazing her fingertips, like it's the nearest it could possibly be, and everything about like this whole cluster is about precision, like precision control of angles, precision control of time, and an element that I haven't quite figured out how it fits is the ability to penetrate anything. Like it's a very like all or nothing power set. I guess is one way to look at it.
Sure.
So yeah, she triggers just after the train kills her mother and several others, I guess. And her shard seems to be the one that, like her primary shard seems to be fixated on the cycle. There's an awareness within this shard of all the other shards and their masks and their roles, very similar to Valkyrie's perspective on the cycle. And she's her trigger event is basically watching the shards flicker through countless cycles.
Yeah. I like that because we're kind of like, we know March is dealing with these time bubbles and we know she's doing something with this and something's going on there. So the book is stressing that the cycles, the cyclical nature of the shards is something that is going to be paramount to whatever March is trying to accomplish. And that's established right here in her trigger vision.
Yeah. So she hears who we later learn is Homer screaming, probably realizing that his friend is dead, or his girlfriend or whatever. And the trigger vision briefly strikes her again, presumably as he triggers.
Yeah.
She gets a taxi to take her to Juilliard, repeating herself like a machine, a metronome.
Yeah, I think this is the most upsetting moment in this early part of it for me, that like even after what she did and what happened to her, she just like carries on doing exactly what she would do. She just gets in a car, heads to Juilliard to try out. It's disturbing. I mean, like the metronome speak is like explicitly meant to be disturbing, right? Like she just repeats Juilliard again.
Yeah.
And it's so creepy.
Right. Yeah. May is already kind of creepy, but it made me wonder, like, how much did this event like crack her versus how much was she already cracked?
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the other things it does, to me at least, is we learn a little bit later that, that this cluster in particular shares personality traits and trades them kind of back and forth depending on who wants or uses what. And I think to me, this kind of demonstrates that didn't happen right away, that she's still kind of very much a similar version of the person she was right after the trigger event. And that change happens a little bit after she like realizes that she can push away the parts of her she doesn't like.
Yeah. And it wouldn't be a time theme chapter if we didn't cut back and forth in time. So now that we've ended this, the maze trigger event section, we're now in the present with March driving her small army, her mega cluster, as she calls it, toward Brockton Bay. And we gradually learn about her allies. We've got Tori, Goddess's fourth cluster mate, the force field user. We got Ixnay, the baby. She also thinks of Vista as like a teenage girl. So again, an awareness of ages.
Yep.
we see her take in the destruction of Bet and think about it entirely in disconnected, inhuman terms. Like, all she's really noticing about it is the intricacy and the novelty of it, like watching an elaborate domino setup or a Rube Goldberg machine or like a bloodless industrial disaster or something.
Yeah. I think while we saw someone that was a little off in May, March is March now, and March is mad. And it is like, we see it increasingly as we go through this chapter, but like, you're right. There's this detached nonchalance here. Foyle told us that everything is a game to March, and that's the person we see here. She comes up upon, Vista's inceptioning of Brockton Bay, and she cackles, she laughs. It's fun to her. It's a game. It's so much more fun this way. It's going to be great. And it's just disturbing. It's so disturbing in such an effective way. And that's what, like, look, I know, like, March is awful. Like, she's like an awful, awful, awful person. But I find her character just delightful because it's just so off and weird and silly on top of disturbing. And I enjoy reading that.
Yeah, it's a great villain. I agree. I hate her more than I've hated anyone in the story so far, which is interesting because this is a story that has Cradle in it.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure why exactly. I kind of want to figure that out.
Yeah. You should examine that.
Well, I think part of it is just the casual killing.
Sure.
Like, Cradle is hurting people in an unforgivable way because he's angry and wants revenge. March just doesn't care.
Yeah.
So anyway, March seems to think that Vista doesn't like understand her own power, or she like isn't using it right. Vista, veteran cape and sole survivor of the Brockton Bay wards, who's beaten and outright killed loads of people, who has all kinds of tricks that she uses in combat. Sure, okay, March. Yeah.
Yeah. It is interesting. I think it's an introduction of her concept of the quiet part of the power, right? Mm-hmm. Not the end effect but the weird stuff that happens while she's using it. And she sees this as the best parts of the power, and Vista's not using that part. And we'll see if she's right. We'll see who wins. I mean, we don't know.
Yeah, I mean, maybe she is right, but like, I just immediately, as soon as she was thinking this, I was like, yeah, like that time that she like stretched and then pinched off a building to collapse it onto someone.
Right.
That's not. Yeah. Okay.
It's not a very quiet part.
It's not quiet, but it is an application of her power as it's being used, rather than like, I don't know.
Well,
maybe I'm
it,
not understanding what she means exactly.
I mean, I think that's part of it for me too, and I think it's because like what she's saying is kind of nonsensical throughout most of this chapter. So it's like sometimes it's really hard to parse exactly what you mean, which again I think is intentional. Because if you look at the March Hare, like we have Alice in Wonderland references sprinkled throughout this entire chapter, and if you look at the March Hare and the Mad Hatter and the conversation they had, it's mostly nonsense. It's mostly like cleverness with wordplay and true meanings or implied meanings of words, and we kind of see her talk similar to that throughout this chapter.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, all right. Related to that, March says a bunch of gobbledygook to Tori, who is her apparent squeeze, which makes more sense after having taken in the whole chapter. Basically, the gist of it is that she thinks of decades of time together as short term because she's got her sights set on forever. Yeah.
I hate when I say the thing that I wrote down right before the spot in the script that I wrote it down, because this is where I wrote down all that stuff that her talk here is very confusing. Like it's kind of like Mad Hatter, March Hare type doublespeak here. Like the idea, like we'll be here for decades. It's short is long when long is longest kind of thing.
Yeah,
like it's just like this like one of the first conversations the March Hare has in Alice in Wonderland is like they say have some more tea, and Alice is like, I can't have more if I didn't have any to begin with, and they're like, yes you can. It's like having more than nothing is the easiest thing in the world, and they're just like just nonsense, like contradictions or technical definitions, and that's kind of what this is. It's like long is shorter than forever. And it's just like kind of nonsense, confusing doublespeak type stuff.
What's funny is that Tori like points this out, and you almost get the sense that this happens a lot.
Yeah.
Where she's like, she's first she's happy, and she's like, oh no, wait, you're doing that thing.
Right. Right. But I mean, the most interesting thing of this to me is this idea that she does say, like, whatever March is planning here, they will have decades together. So it's not like she's going to stroll up to one of these time bubbles, pop it, and then the world's going to immediately end. Whatever it is, it's going to take some time.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. So then March romantically vows to murder our beloved Vista so the city can bloom like a flower. Hey, Scott, I would really not mind if March got hit by a train soon.
Yeah, as much as I find this delightfully zany character, that kind of ends when they start hurting the people I like.
Yeah.
And we get this line, "You're so weird. I'm ahead of the curve." And I love that as like, I mean, it's just a clever March thing to say. Also, the Joker says it in Dark Knight. But anyway, it's also like, I think, you know, goes into what we've been talking about with the fact that like things are getting worse and villains are willing to get more and more extreme, and heroes have to respond with higher and higher levels of force because of that, and how this could just escalate and keep going. And I think March totally buys into that, and she just steps above where everyone else is and fully thinks that you're going to get to where I am eventually.
Yeah.
Just terrifying, because where she is I don't give a fuck about anybody.
Yep. This is one of those chapters where like if March were anticlimactically like killed by a piece of concrete to the head, I would have been like, that was a strange narrative choice, but somehow I don't mind. Moving on.
Also in my headcanon, the Dark Knight exists in this universe, and March just quoted the Joker, which is perfect.
Yeah, maybe they got that movie from Aleph or whatever.
Yeah.
Well, that's a whole weird thing though, that Batman would be anyway.
Yeah, that it would be really weird. I don't know how that would work.
Yeah.
Would people be interested in a rich dude without superpowers in a world with superpowers? I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe that's like a novelty.
Yeah, right. There's got to be at least one of those. A cape who isn't a parahuman.
Yeah.
So we meet several more of her allies. There's Jace and Megan, who are two of the other goddess cluster mates. The Grey
I think
twins.
Megan's the power enhancer one, right?
Yeah,
the battery.
Yeah, I believe you're right. The Grey twins, Ixnay wearing Imp's arm, Kingdom Come, who's apparently injured, and then like a bunch of corner world thugs whose names I don't recall hearing before. And they all exit the vehicles and they start the attack, with March using her combat thinker power to give everyone hand signals and coordinate them.
Yeah. So we see her kind of march her troops out there, and this is when like we see that how she commands the battlefield. That she is kind of like she's dressed up like a bunny like soldier, right? Like she's in a marching uniform, and she's kind of commanding her troops like they're a drum line or something. And I mean, it's like the frustrating thing about this is it's really cool. Like I hate that it's cool, but it is like she just has like this casual, indifferent, confident command of the battlefield as she just kind of uses her power to just wipe the floor with everything.
Yeah. And the detachment, the detachment does come off as God, I hate to use the word cool in this context because I hate this person, but like there is something very mesmerizing, I guess, about a character who like her power and confidence here comes from her madness and like lack of concern for anyone or anything, and the fact that she just like knows that she's gonna win.
Right. Yeah.
I get this bit here. She'd skin foil and wrap herself in foil. She would soak herself in foil and gorge herself on foil's flesh. Foil's clothes would be decoration, as she had fancied once upon a time. She would be in and of and greater than and less than and equal to foil. Then she would be in and of and to and through foil, and vice versa. And if foil made it, which she would, provided March didn't make any hilariously bad slips with the knives, which she wouldn't, then what was left of her would come to accept it in time. She would see that it all made sense. She would even come to love it. Cool.
Let's move on. I don't want to talk about it. This is really gross. I am a little confused about this in the concept of what we learn her goal is at the end, right? Because it seems like we're jumping ahead a little bit, but at the end she realizes that Homer has died and then becomes part of some cluster collective in heaven that she can be part of, and she wants Foil to be there too. So why she gotta like do all the gross torture-y stuff to do that?
I don't know.
She doesn't want her to die. Like she says right here, like if Foil made it, which she would, providing I didn't make any slips with the knives, hilariously bad slips,
right.
which is just like disgusting. Ugh. Anyway, it just I mean, like, I don't know. I guess like the idea is like I'm gonna torture you until you love me, and then we're gonna eventually die together, and then get to be
or they're like the same person. I mean that's what's I mean I don't have anything to really say. Like it's I think we'll understand eventually, but she seems to want to like literally merge with Foil.
Yeah.
Which is more than just like being with her in heaven.
Yeah.
Because like it's not really heaven. It's a mainframe where they're all just sort of like merged together over time. Look,
you define heaven the way you want to, and I'll define it the way I want.
I see.
You're right. It's. I think the problem is we're trying to attach logic to a character that doesn't have any.
Yeah, and I have to say, as fucked up as that was, the like reading that out loud was actually kind of awesome, just like because of the way it sounds.
It's good writing.
Yeah,
you're right. You're absolutely right.
It sounds amazingly like sonorous and just like the beats of it, like reading it out loud just sound. I copied it because it was fucked up, but now that I read it out loud, I was like, that's just like kind of beautiful, I don't know.
Well, I mean, I think it's some of the like repetition sometimes really makes things land home, right? And that's what we have here. I can't believe we're focusing on this. I hate it so much. Like she would be in and of and greater and less. Then she would be in and of and to and through. It kind of rhyme. I mean, it does specifically rhyme. It's sing-songy again. It's Lewis Carroll-y, Alice in Wonderland-y again. It's her being herself. And it's great. It's great.
Yep. So we skip back to a later point in May's life, or an earlier point, I should say, and she's stretching out a life of dissolution on her inheritance, partying with other teens in empty houses.
Yeah, and we already see a change from the May we knew back in that first part of the chapter. We have jumped back in time. She's not quite the March that we know today, but she's a lot closer to her than she was. Her obsession with time still remains. She still describes everyone by their age. This is where we see like teenager, 20-something girl, 20-something guy. But she's also like doing things like blowing up an apple tree with a vinyl disc and like catching an apple behind her back with two fingers, like just like using her power in really showy offy ways, but not like no one's looking. Like she specifically mentions that like when she catches the apple behind her back with two fingers, like nobody's paying attention to that. Like she's just doing it for herself, for her own enjoyment.
Yeah, right. This is who she is, right?
Yeah, she wants to. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's worth pointing out, like this life she's leading now sort of looks like kind of how she imagined Lily's life to be. Like it's just like fun and freedom and whatever she wants whenever she wants it.
Yeah, so naturally we now look at what Lily's life is now.
Yep. Fletchette's hero commercial, hero introduction commercial, which is just wonderfully perfectly like PR streamlined. And then the scene, of course, was ruined by the squawk as the ad shifted to cramming as much merchandising as possible into the last 1.87 seconds. Which would normally be like a joke, but it's March, so
no, it's literally 1.87 seconds.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, it is great to compare this to what May was just doing. Right, we have Flechette in this commercial, like using her power over and over again to do cool things, to show how effective her power is. It's similar to March's showy, offy way, right? Like they're both showing off. Both of them. But Flechette's showing off is serious business because it's for this, like, this is me. This is what I'm capable of. You're going to see me on the streets. This is what I can do. It has a point to it. Whereas March's is is utterly pointless. It's not actually achieving anything. And I love that's a great way of comparing them. They're both showing off in these two different scenes, but it's different. It's completely different.
Yeah, that's true. I like that. Yeah. One of the party goers starts to explain to her about clusters, which starts March down a rabbit hole.
Are you proud of yourself for that?
I mean, we had to.
Are you proud?
We had to get it in.
Are you happy? Are you going to sleep well tonight knowing you just did that?
I got it off my chest.
Great. Let's move on.
The cops show up, and this bit got a good laugh out of me. Fuck, one of the oldest people present shouted. One of the sober people. He was tattooed, and he'd been the one supplying the drugs. He paused for reflection, then uttered a louder, fiercer, fuck. I don't know why. It's great. Just the idea of like reflecting on your life choices and then just doubling down on that.
Yeah, anyway. I don't think there's anything analytical to say about that other than it's just funny writing.
It's just funny.
Yeah.
So we see her using her power a bit to help the kids escape the house when the police arrive. It's a bit like having a mental simulation that she can scrub through and update as she learns new information. And the way she understands and navigates it has to do with time, of course. I can't help but recall here Kenzie's time camera that doesn't use timestamps. Not sure if there's like a connection or like the opposite of a connection, but it's interesting anyway.
Yeah, interesting. It could operate on the same general principle, I guess. Was like, we don't actually know. Do all Tinkers do like the scanny thingy that we've seen Tinkers do? Like, is it possible that she like was around or was observing March fight in that battle? And like, because the first time they saw March was before the existence of the time camera, I think. Mm-hmm. Yes, it was. Yes, it was.
I think that the speedrunners were who she said she got it from.
That's true.
But I mean, yeah, March was also there. And I mean, according to like Weaver Dice docs, I think that it's safe to say that scanning is an important part of Tinkers. I mean, there may be some that don't have it at all.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense for it to come from the speedrunners because like it's more, their stuff is more. I mean, her stuff is. I don't know. Yeah. It's cool to think about.
Yeah. Well, I was more speaking on a thematic level, or like a less literal level of like Fine. the fact that March's power is scrubbing back and forth through time, but Kenzie's tech does a similar-ish thing, but doesn't have an awareness of time per se. Like the fact that it doesn't use timestamps, it's like the opposite of that. I don't know. I'm going to move on. Yeah.
No, I like it. It's interesting to think about at least.
Yeah. So back in the present, she and her crew pretty easily mow through some defending hero capes, with March casually murdering at least one of them by exploding his heart and face.
Yeah, so we start doing this thing that's going to carry us through the rest of the chapter now, whereas the present day March cuts are basically like increasingly short and quick, just violence.
Yeah.
And then we cut back to March's story. So we're like intercutting between these two, and it's really effective. I actually like it a lot. It kind of like we're counting down to March getting to her goal as we're exploring her past. And it's delightful. Like she's such a badass, and I hate it.
Yeah, right. I hate that the most badass character in the story is this unhinged villain.
Yeah, and it is very interesting. Like we're a million words into this book, and the casual killing of someone like this is still like it's so off-putting to me. Like I mean, there's been death in this story, but not nearly this much. Like I feel like this way in this time in Worm, like everyone was just dying. I mean, we had Endbringer fights, right? So like we saw people die, and it's just like shocking, like the casual nature of, oh, this guy's just dead now. Yeah. He's just like, you stabbed him and then you blew his face up and he's just dead. Right. Okay, next.
Yeah, I mean, it was similarly off-putting when she killed that one fallen guy, and it was basically like an execution. Pretty fucked up. Yeah.
Yeah, but at least we didn't like that guy.
Yeah, it's true.
He was fallen.
Yeah, this guy was a hero that we don't know.
Yeah.
So in the past, again, she has a chat with Homer, who seems like a cool and philosophical fellow now. He kind of reminds me of Rain, like how the personality bleed seems to have made him a better person, but in a way that might be contingent or temporary. Let's save talking about the name Homer for the name game, I think.
Sure. One of the things I did want to talk about while we're here, though, is this idea of the personality bleed, because this is something that we've been kind of wrestling with since its introduction very early in the story. And this question of, did Rain change because Rain wanted to change, or did Rain change because a new personality, new emotions were thrust upon him? And we see here that in this cluster, at least, people are indeed inheriting things from other members of the cluster. March seems to have Homer's, penchant for addiction. Flechette has gotten March's rigid seriousness, right? That's March Foil was the fun girl that was having all the fun, and now she is serious. The only thing we have, like, Homer mentions singing. I think he mentions that he's better at singing now because March was good at instruments, and they seem to be like trading these traits and skills. And I think the implication is, if you start using it again, it's going to go away from me. And this is really fascinating because, like, what they say here is, we get what the others don't want. Seems like it, or what we have in abundance. So basically, the parts of yourself you don't want, you can push that off of you and onto other people and keep only the parts of you that you do like. And that would be really interesting if that was also applied to Rain's cluster. But we don't actually know if that's the case, right? Like, as we dig further into this chapter, we are going to learn that these clusters have unique gimmicks to them. And we've kind of already seen that with the whole dream room. Yeah. And this could very well just be their unique gimmick, and it's not one that extends to other clusters.
Yeah, I agree that I don't actually feel inclined to read too much into the fact that, like, I don't want to say, like, oh, their cluster works this way. In fact, if anything, I would be inclined to take it the other way, that we learn, like, oh, they literally straight up trade personality traits. That's probably not how Rain's cluster works then, because it seems like none of these clusters work similarly, very like other than like some sense of doing things that make the cluster more likely to hate each other.
Right.
Yeah.
They all have a gimmick, but they don't seem to share gimmicks. Yeah. But this is the part that I wanted to link back to, because I find this really fascinating. Because remember, when May was waiting for the train, she looked at Lily and wanted so badly to have her life, to be that person. Mm-hmm. She looked at Homer and wanted so badly to have his freedom, to have that life. And then they trigger, and what does their cluster do? It gives her the ability to do that exact thing. It gives her the ability to take upon the traits of that person and live the life like that person. Mm-hmm. That's just, I love it. It's perfect. And that also really cements the idea for me that this is just a her cluster thing, because it seems like the cluster, the gimmick of the cluster relates in some way to the nature of the trigger.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I agree. That's exactly right.
Yeah. We also have to remember that, or we have to state here that Homer says he's probably going to die here. He's a mercenary. The enemies are catching up to him, and he's probably going to die. He's basically saying goodbye.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting how much I care about Homer within like 5 lines, and then we learn he's dead soon.
Yeah, that's true.
Back in the present, it looks like March has killed 7 people and gotten mildly disheveled for her trouble.
Yeah. Once again, like, it's just disturbing. Like, 7 of the 8 people that entered the maze are now dead at the explosion. And again, like, these timelines are shortening. Nothing stopping her. She's going forward. She's laughing. It's like this inevitable march of time, and I don't like it. Yeah, but I like it.
Yes. Thanks. I hate it, as they say. So in the past, again, March travels the countryside with Jan, the Powers researcher bodyguard duo, and I'm sure they get into all kinds of wacky adventures. They find the goddess cluster, their powers already having been stolen by Bianca. Apparently, this group was caught up in interdimensional smuggling. And it's a weird cluster. I guess all clusters are weird. It's kind of what we just said. But the triggers were days apart in this case. And there's speculation on the part of March and Jan that the portal might have interfered with the cluster formation. The cluster had an explicit carousel of who was like in charge of the cluster, meaning the agenda of the whole cluster swerved from day to day. So this is something we talked about a little bit. Like, is it correct to say that the goddess cluster has built into it a distinct power siphoning mechanism, and that they didn't, like, goddess didn't actually use the blood and flesh transfer trick?
I mean, it's tough. I think the answer to that is yes. But we also we're going to see our friend Bill in a bit that is draining them of their blood and thusly getting more powerful, right? So there seems to be some truth to that. But maybe that's just his way is that way, and goddess has her own way. But I mean, I think that the important thing of this to me is that this idea of you can steal the powers from your cluster might just be bullshit. This seems to be a specific consequence of goddess's specific cluster gimmick, right? And it doesn't necessarily mean that is something that is going to extend beyond her that one cluster. So like this whole thing that we've been talking about for this whole book, that like Rain's cluster wants to take his powers and become more powerful. This whole, like, Tattletale told this horror story about these things that you have to do and how it works. That could have just been like a misread. That could have just been her reading what March wants to do. That could be just what March wants to do to Foil for her own very specific reasons, nothing to do with taking her power, just because she's obsessed with her, and she just, like, that's a misread on her part.
Could have been.
It is.
Go ahead.
It is interesting though, because like what we're doing here with March, I think, is like we're stripping away all the mysterious parts of her. Like all these questions we had at the beginning with March is like, how does she know so much about clusters? She must like be in tune to something. It's like, no, she just had a friend that was like a cape nerd. Just had a regular friend. And it's like, did she find a way to kill her cluster mate and absorb his powers? No, he just died from some random mercenaries. Because he was a mercenary and he got in too much trouble with the villains and they killed him. And it's like all this, like this allure around her as this powerful, like mastermind type figure, is not, she's just kind of this crazy chick. Yeah.
It didn't, I probably, well, it only occurred to me, this only occurred to me just now, so I didn't have time to look it up, obviously, but like, didn't someone say fairly like authoritatively, like, oh, March must have found their third and drained him, and that's why she has this power boost?
Right. Yeah, that was an assumption that they made. Yes, correct.
And it's actually like nothing like that.
Nope.
Homer's just dead, and if she has a power boost, it's because she has Tori hanging out with her, or Megan.
Megan,
giving her power boosts when she needs it.
Or it just works like any of their clusters, where if one of them is murdered, the other get a little more powerful. But that feels like a specific Rain gimmick because of the tokens, though.
Yeah.
It's like all these clusters are very weird and unique.
Yeah.
And like everyone has been like, it's so funny that like the story has had these 3 clusters so far that we've talked about. And there's been assumptions made because one of them, something is true for one of them, it must be true in some way for all of them. And what I think we're learning here is that it doesn't quite work that way. It's a little more complicated than that. That just because something is true for X cluster, it doesn't mean Y cluster.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I definitely, it's funny because like the more I think about it, the less sure I am about what's going to happen.
Right. Well, and it's not entirely clear here, and March doesn't help with that because March like is crazy, but like we're not, like we do see Bill is draining their blood and it is working to give them more power. So it seems like there was some part of this DNA switch mechanism that does actually do something. It actually works, but we're not quite sure if that is specific to that cluster or not.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, worth saying maybe that he tries to drain March's blood, but it doesn't do anything. So he just kind of lets her die. And as she's slipping toward death, she has a vision, one reminiscent of visions we've seen from other capes who skirted the edge of death, namely the Ashleys. We see the onyx and carmine crystal facets with a kaleidoscopic landscape, which she sees as being alive with patterns, people, ideas, events. She can see how there's a kind of slot for Homer, who's already dead, and she can communicate with him here. And then there's a slot for Flechette, who isn't there yet. And as she's kind of perceiving this world or dimension or whatever it is, text says, she could sympathize with the blood priest who was scrabbling so viciously for this. He told himself it was for power, but he was really after this, she felt. He wanted this connection, something beyond the short and fleeting life, a heaven where she would never be alone, forever in the company of another, running through, over, under, into, communicating through shared events and bursts of static, riddling each other out. So, like,
that's a thing.
Yep. And this apparently like changes her life. Like this is kind of reminds me of that of like how she saw foil on the train platform and she's like, I'll remember this forever. It's like this is an event that basically changes the course of her life, because now this is her goal. Basically, she went from being this just aimless person to being someone who wants this now.
Yeah.
So yeah, people rescue the cluster from the blood priest, and it's unclear whether they're cauldrons or Biancas or what exactly. But anyway,
I thought that in my thing they were cauldron. They were like, they got rid of Bianca, and then the rest of the clusters were like, okay, well, we'll just take the power. And they're like, oh fuck, okay, we'll just put them all together, and that way they're out of the way. I think that was my interpretation.
Yeah, I think cauldron probably wanted Bianca as their ace in the hole.
Yeah,
like they wanted her to stay in power, so they took care of this problem for Bianca.
Yeah.
And then they gave her all of her cluster mates.
Yeah.
So overall, she's changed by the experience. She's now obsessed with reaching this shard heaven where she will have eternity to wear away the traces of her life in the flesh and submerge herself in connection to these people she's obsessed with.
Yeah. So that's the end of our chapter here, Matt. Shard Heaven is back in a big way.
Yep.
And March wants to be part of it. And this, I mean, let's talk about that a little bit, because we've had, like, throughout the story, we've had this concept of the Shard afterlife, right? Since Snag died, we when we were introduced to this concept of something happens after death, specifically to these capes. There's this place, presumably you're returning, the Shard is returning to the source, quote unquote, and your personality goes with it in some way, because your personality is written into who you are is written into the Shard in some way, and it's going with it. It's like this joined afterlife thing. And so one of the things I think we have to do when we're analyzing a work of fiction is we look at this concept that's been introduced and clarified here, and we say, okay, what does this have to do with the story, right? Like what does that have to do with the themes we're talking about? We've talked a lot about the themes of the story in this idea of recovery, in getting better and improving, in getting past the bad things that have happened in your life and hopefully becoming better, or at least able to handle that kind of thing. So how does a Shard afterlife fit into that? And one of the things that I'm interested in exploring, and we'll have to, revisit this as we go through this next arc and the rest of the book, is this idea of, it's kind of the death of change, right? Like, because we look at Rain, and Rain is this character who doesn't want to die because he doesn't feel like he has made up for the bad things he's done yet. He hasn't earned forgiveness. He hasn't earned redemption. He's not fully better yet. And I feel like this concept of Shard Heaven is the removal of that. Like, you're just like, you rejoin the source, and you're just that, like, you can't change anymore. You're gone, and you're part of this other thing. And like, the characters that want that are the characters that aren't interested in recovery, aren't interested in getting better, aren't interested in changing. They're the characters that are just fine with that. A character who says, none of this matters. None of this in the world matters anymore because we know there's this other thing. And this is can be a pretty interesting criticism of some religion's view on the importance of the afterlife. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. But I just love this idea of this is like a stagnation of recovery, because you don't.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like I want to understand better what the nature of this Shard Heaven is. I agree with everything you just said. The thing that I fixate on is, well, the fact that March is fixated on this aspect of connection, because it doesn't from my parsing of what she's saying here, it's not even necessarily that you're like they just make like a copy of your brain and upload it to the cloud and it stays there forever. It's more like things happen in Shard Heaven. But it's not like an afterlife per se where your life continues to be like a normal life. It's like you're gradually sort of subsumed into like just like the way I would phrase it. Again, I'm kind of extrapolating, but like the shards is just sort of like spend eternity digesting your mind, and like learning, like because that's what they're all about is learning, right? Borrowing from your conflict. So they spend the rest of eternity wearing you away into nothingness in their own efforts to perfect themselves. And I guess in some sense, you're like transcendently becoming the shard, but I'm going to take the more pessimistic view that basically they're just using you for like information fuel, because that's their quest. They don't actually care about you. They don't have any interest in preserving you or making you happy. Like, I mean, and then I go back to Snag. Snag's last thoughts of like, and then he realized that he was fucked for eternity, basically. Is my paraphrasing of it, like an endless dream where there would be no rest, basically. Not going to be good, Mark. It's not what you're imagining, I don't think.
Right, yeah. She's decided it's this wonderful, great thing that is everything she ever wanted. It's not.
Yeah.
I think that's absolutely right. And I think that's, as we go through the story, making distinctions between the characters who look at this concept and say, yes, that is what I want, versus the characters that look at this concept and say no, there's work to do here. Like these people that are like we've got to fix this world. Like we've got to fix this world. This is the world we have, versus no, we don't have to bother because we're gonna be there and it's gonna be fine.
Yeah.
And that is like antithetical to, I think, the idea of recovery, right? Is that it doesn't matter what I do here. It doesn't matter if I get better. It doesn't matter if I fix the world. None of this matters, because I get to go to this other place afterwards that I've decided is better.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it's this is how things are now versus fuck that.
Exactly. Fuck that.
Yep.
Fuck you, heaven.
I love it. All right. Name game, Scott. Homer.
So Homer, ladies and gentlemen that don't live in America, is a nickname for a home run in baseball.
Which is the best possible way of hitting a baseball.
Yeah.
Similar to his power, apparently he has a literal baseball and baseball bat, which he hits, and according to him, pretty much always just kills people with it, which he doesn't like because he's not like a inherently violent guy.
So could you say it homes back in?
That's another possibility. Like it's a homing missile, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I think the primary is Homer, as in, I mean, he's carrying a baseball and a bat. So I mean it is one of those things that works in multiple cases.
Yeah, I was trying to make it work with the Greek poet.
I tried to do that for about 10 seconds too, and I was like, Scott, what are you doing?
Yeah, I don't know.
This is going to be a 2.5 hour podcast.
Yeah,
we don't need to do that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that's okay. There's probably more to it. There's always more to it, but I like it's kind of lighthearted and funny, actually, as it is just being a baseball joke.
Yeah, which
kind of goes with his character as being like a not really a violent guy who's stuck with a violent power.
Yeah.
Okay, so this episode is extremely long, so we're not going to be able to do the community spotlight and talk about y'all's answers to the question last week.
No, let's tell them the truth, Matt. We were extremely disappointed in all your answers. I'm just kidding. I loved your answers. Last week's question was your favorite example of Victoria's leadership qualities, and lots of good answers, lots of different things that not even I thought of. Oh, I don't like how I said that. That makes it like, well, if I didn't think of it. The point is, you guys came up with some stuff that I didn't think of.
Well,
and we liked them, but we're running so late.
Well, what's funny is whichever one of us thinks up the discussion question, we're like, I think I know what people are going to talk about. And you always talk about like such a broader range than the thing that we had in mind. And that's great.
That's what we love. Yeah.
So the discussion question for this week is, what is your favorite structural trick in a Wildbow story?
Yeah, so explore everything that he's done in, and you can go to Twig and Pact if you want, since Matt can pretty much read all those now. I can't. But,
yeah, I mean, we're not going to read them on the show if you talk about Twig or Pact, but I mean, I know there are some fun ones in there too.
Yeah.
But yeah.
So talk structure to us. I love structure. Talk structure nerdy to me, everyone.
Yep, we made the question open-ended as possible, so be creative with that. And that's all we have for you on this week's extra long episode of We've Got Ward. You guys are all part of this show, so feel free to provide us with advice, questions, or thoughts on this week's reading.
You can reach out to us via email at gotwormpod@gmail.com or over on our Twitter account at gotwormpod. My personal Twitter is at scottdaily85. And Matt's is at March Hare Dinamail.
If you're not already subscribed to We've Got Ward, we strongly recommend you do so and never miss an episode. You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, YouTube, Google Play, and pretty much anywhere else podcasts can be found.
And as always, you can find this and all the other shows we do over at doofmedia.com. That includes Deep Impact, an episode-by-episode, chapter-by-chapter discussion of Pact. I think they're moving on to Arc 3 this week, and I'm struggling to catch up. I'm going to do it. I've read 3 whole chapters of Pact now, and I'm moving in. And so I'm gonna catch up with the show. And I do it.
And I am caught up with the show, and I am just like delighted that just like I'm just like enjoying it more and more every episode, which is just great. I'm just so happy.
That's cool. I mean, we're seeing this from a side that we've never seen before, right? Like we've always been on the other end with this stuff, and it's cool.
Yeah, right. I finally understand. And if you like any of our shows and you want to support them, consider donating to our Patreon account, patreon.com/doofmedia. You can donate $1 a month or whatever else you can afford. Supporting us on Patreon gives you tons of great bonuses like voting in our fan art and costume contests, Q&A sessions, access to live streams of our recording sessions, and our excellent Discord chat. Special thanks to new Bidoofs, Wim, Almost Famous, Kim L, Daniel, Lucas R, and Zeke F, all at the $1 level, and Goldfish Bowl at the $2 level. Wow, that is such a
ton of people, guys.
Yeah, that's so nice.
It's amazing.
Melts me. Yeah, thanks. And as always, make sure you head over to Wildbow's Patreon, patreon.com/Wildbow, and donate to him as well. This is his world. We are just playing in it. You
were trying to come up with something clever, and you got nothing.
That's accurate. Yep.
It's ironic that playing in it works for being clever this time, though, because it's just a game to March.
Yeah. So I did that on purpose. Mm-hmm.
Sure you did.
Yeah.
We got an email right before we started recording about someone asking about like what the Doof Discord was. I don't think we've ever since we did it, we haven't ever explained what that is. So I think most people know what Discord is. It's the chat program, but Discord interacts with Patreon. So if you pledge to us at any level, you will automatically be given access to our Discord chat, where we talk about everything, like all of the shows we do. A lot of Wildbow work talk. Yeah. But just some general talk about other movies and TV and books and stories we like and all that stuff. So,
and Scott and I are in there kind of all the time, and it's just
probably too much.
Yeah, it's I mean, it's just really it's great. Like it's one of the things that I didn't foresee when we started Doof and all this, but it's been a very positive thing.
Yeah, I was terrified that we were going to start this thing and it was just going to be dead and awkward, and it has not been that at all.
Not at all.
Thanks for everyone that hangs out with us in Discord. All right. If you cannot afford to donate, that's fine. We're going to miss you in Discord, but that's absolutely okay. There are tons of ways you guys can help us out. You can head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review. This week's review comes from Lincoln Mike, who gives us 5 stars and says, "This is the first podcast I've really listened to, and these guys keep blowing my mind with how deeply they're inspecting the book. I get close to the end of their analysis of Worm, and the speculations and I'm getting close to the end of their analysis of Worm, and the speculations and connections made here never fail to impress. Could not recommend this podcast enough." Wow. Thank you, Lincoln Mike. It sounds like you're really behind on the podcast, so it might be like a year and a half before you hear this. But thank you for taking the time to review us. We really, really do appreciate it.
Yeah, somebody tell Lincoln Mike that we gave him a shout out.
Yeah.
All right, that's all for this week. We now know that Arc 12 is going to be called something. So join us next week for the first part of Arc 12, Heavens.
You read that so weird. Like, that sentence was a mess.